Welcome everyone joining us in the gallery this evening and those online to the 28th of August 2023 Council meeting. I now open the meeting at 7:03 p.m. I will now pass you on to the Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Alison Beckwith, who will read out the formalities.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome to this ordinary meeting of Council. My name is Alison Beckwith and I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at Banyule Council. Tonight's meeting is being held in person in accordance with the provisions of Council's governance rules and the Local Government Act 2020. The meeting is being live streamed via Council's website and Facebook pages. The live stream is not interactive and any comments or private messages directed to us via the live stream will not be presented to the Council group and have no bearing on the conduct of tonight's meeting. Council's request to speak methods continue to allow participation of our residents without having to attend the meeting in person. I'll just take you through some rules of our participation for tonight's meeting. Please note that any public questions submitted for tonight's Council meeting will be read out by a member of our executive leadership team and a verbal response will be provided. Questions and the responses will be also provided in the meeting minutes following tonight's meeting. Council does not accept questions as part of its request to speak process, and no statement may be derogatory, defamatory or directed to an individual councillor, member of staff, ratepayer or member of the public. A 2-minute time limit does apply to our request to speak tonight. The timer will be used and a warning will sound at the 1.5 minute mark. And officers will sum up if they are indeed reading out on a resident's behalf. And if you are in person tonight, just start to sum up at that when that sound bell rings. We ask that members of the gallery please check their phones and ensure that it's either switched off or on silent mode to avoid any disruptions to tonight's meeting. Thank you. Members of the gallery, that you may wish to leave the meeting tonight while the meeting is still in progress. We just ask that you please don't hold any conversations just out in the foyer area. It does actually come into the room and affect the live stream and those at home. So we do ask that you make your way out through the library and hold your conversations out there. And I thank you in advance for that. I will now introduce the councillors that are here for tonight's meeting and I'll start to my left. So Deputy Mayor, Councillor Alida McKern, Councillor Peter Di Morellis and Councillor Alison Champion. And to my right, I have the Mayor, Councillor Peter Castaldo, Councillor Fiona Mitsanikos, Councillor Rick Garotti, Councillor Elizabeth Neely and Councillor Mark Di Pasquale. This evening we're also joined by Council's executive team. I have Darren Bennett, Director of Assets and City Services, Natasha Swan, Director of City Development, Kath Brackett, Director of Community Wellbeing, and Tony Toaldo, Acting Director Corporate Services. Also here tonight supporting the Council are members of our governance team and our IT team and our JETS team who are coordinating the live stream. We thank you for your participation in tonight's meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And before we start tonight's meeting, I'll read out the traditional custodian statement. Our meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and we pay respect to all Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders that have resided in the area and been an integral part of our region's history. Any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island elders that may be present tonight. I'll also read out our diversity statement, where Council is committed to the values and diversity within our community. And I will read that statement out now. Our community is made up of diverse cultures, beliefs, abilities, bodies, sexualities, ages and genders. We are committed to access, equity, participation and rights for everyone. Principles which empower, foster harmony and increase the well-being of an inclusive community. We now move on to the Council agenda with apologies first. We have one apology from Councillor Tom Milliken, who has been granted leave of absence and will not be present at this evening's meeting. And there are no other apologies. Leave of absence. Councillors, I note that Councillor Mitsonikos is seeking a leave of absence from Council. Council, it is important for you to note that Council must accept any reasonable request of leave under the Local Government Act 2020. Councillor Mitsonikos, I note you will need to declare a material conflict of interest regarding this leave of absence and to leave the chamber before we vote on this. Thank you. Yes. Now, councillors, I'm seeking a motion from Council to grant Councillor Mitsonikos leave of absence. Moves Councillor Neely and seconded by Councillor Garotti. I now put the motion to grant leave to Councillor Mitsonikos. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We can let Councillor Mitsonikos back in. Thank you. We now move on to the confirmation of minutes. Ordinary meeting of Council held on the 7th of August 2023. Can I please have a councillor to move and second? Moved by Councillor McKern, seconded by Councillor Mitsonikos. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Now, we move on to disclosures of interest. As required in any other meeting of Council, councillors must declare a conflict of interest at the start of the meeting and leave the meeting when the item is presented to Council. Councillors will be required to leave the meeting and return when the item has been resolved. At any point throughout the meeting, if any other councillor recognises that they have a general or material interest, they can flag that at that point and follow the same procedure. Are there any disclosures of interest? No disclosures. Councillor Mitsonikos declared a material conflict of interest and requested a leave of absence, left the room and was not present for that vote. Now, there are no other material. Okay. We now move on to officers that are present. I now ask whether you have a conflict of interest in any items presented before Council this evening. There are no conflicts of interest. We now then move on to urgent business. I note that there is no urgent business this evening, and so move on to petitions. There are no petitions. So we now move on to item 3.1, Advocacy Achievements 2022-23 and Advocacy Priorities for 23-24. Now, there are three speakers to this item this evening. Mr. John Walkley from Friends of Eaglemont Village will address Council in person and is speaking against the recommendation. John, please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, councillors and staff. What I've chosen to speak about tonight at the Odenwald Bridge is that the advocacy item suggests there's been a change in Council's position away from a separate pedestrian bridge costing approximately $1.45 million to an all-traffic bridge that would cost at least $15 million. Community safety is being held to ransom. Odenwald Bridge is for road traffic. It has absolutely no railways purpose, hence no benefit accrues to the railways from it, hence resistance from the railways and the state government spending money on it. Council, on the other hand, has a road traffic obligation and a road safety obligation that can be met out of its own budget. Reliance on state government funding pushes the safety fix further away. We all understand the state government's present financial position, short, medium term, possibly long term. So seeking money from the state government pushes things out into the future, not brings them closer to us. This is, in my view, a recurring council problem, undertaking works or projects that attract subsidy from another level of government. This means that other parties' agendas and priorities are being met, not Banyule ratepayers' priorities and agenda. Ratepayers in Banyule tip in about $120 million per annum, and as a consequence, Banyule ratepayers ought to get $120 million worth of priorities in their needs being met. Chelsworth and Griffin wards are connected by the Odenwald Bridge physically. We put in collectively $35 million. We would ask that this council move on that as a standalone pedestrian bridge, forget the state government and its parlous financial position, and a all-in-one bridge, deal with the safety of the pedestrian bridge, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, next up, we have Michelle Jarvis, who will address council in person and is speaking against the recommendation. Michelle, please approach the lectern.
Thank you. I'm Michelle Jarvis, President, Friends of Banyule. I'm also an appointed community representative member of the North East Link Community Liaison Group, CLG. And I note there is no liaison about it. NELP just informs us what is happening and then moves on. I'm against the motion as it quite simply doesn't go far enough. The advocacy priorities have failed to address health and wellbeing issues that residents along the North East Corridor are facing and will do so for the next 7 years. The advocacy plan and priorities have failed to even note that NELP and its associated projects are a serious health and wellbeing issue for residents right now. It is not simply an infrastructure project or a priority item as our well-built city or a priority along our sustainable environment, and it's failed to be included in the initiative, our inclusive and connected priority initiative. NELP is rendering many tens to probably hundreds of homes virtually unlivable right now. Priority, and I note that priority 14 that's been in attachment 2, Watsonia Station DDA access, include findings to undertake station accessibility to include as part of the Northern Package NELP tender. When I asked about this at a CLG meeting, I was told flat out no. I was said, take it up with your local member, and they had no intention of putting it in their package. I mean, I hope it's changed, but by God, they do not care about the community, and advocacy needs to be stepped up. The Green Bridge, that is better than nothing, but council should be advocating to remove the Lower Plenty Road interchange, which is located over 2 intersections, 1 to 2 kilometres north of Lower Plenty Road. It's unnecessary, and council should be advocating to remove this horrible bottleneck. And I note that there are no health initiatives related to NELP in the Northern Councils Alliance, and there is a serious health issues arising. I'll be 10 seconds more. From dust pollution, light pollution, noise, property access, loss of trees, environmental amenity. People are distressed now, and council needs to be advocating now on those issues, not on long term.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Alicia Curry, and will address council and is speaking against the recommendation. Please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. I'm speaking tonight on the housing advocacy, and I'm speaking against the recommendation because Council seems to be focusing their activities on what land they can put up for sale to produce a new result. But I'm saying that you need to focus your activities on advocacy to state government to produce what is already in the pipeline. There's already land on the ground ready to go. State government has failed to develop it. We've got locations such as Belbardia, Tarracan. We're waiting on the finish of Belfield, which council's involved in. There's a number of other sites that are on the ground. There's no reason to be putting up Banyule Council land. In the new housing strategy, currently open for consultation, a lot of your directives are towards council land and how you can get involved. And I'm saying, don't get involved. Don't get involved in the developing, because when you do get involved, and Belfield is a good example, you provided Belfield land. It's only about 14% of the whole site development. The rest of the development is commercial, and those units, 58 units or 57, cost about $421,000 without the cost of land. So that seems to me just really expensive. So I think you should focus your activities on getting these sites delivered. And I'd also like to say that I disagree with your adopting that interim social housing policy. Many councils developed and operated a policy years ago and had the consultation, and you are way behind the game. So focus on the state government advocacy to get what's on the ground delivered, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Before we move on, I've just got a quick question for probably the CEO around the Odenwald Bridge advocacy. It was noted that we're only choosing one course of action to advocate for that. Could you please clarify what council is doing in advocacy for the Odenwald Bridge? Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Basically, we've received advice from Metro Trains and the Department of Transport that basically the bridge isn't designed for the outcome that we were looking for. So they've determined that we can't actually do the original plan. So Councillor McKern and myself have already met with Anthony Carbines, the local member for Ivanhoe, and highlighted it and actually given a new advocacy pack. I even spoke to Anthony as late as Thursday last week, where he was seeking further information to continue conversations with the state departments on their advice to us to date.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the speakers this evening? Councillor McKern.
Through you, Mayor, if I could just ask a question of the Director of City Development in relation to speaker number one, Mr. Walkley, and his comment that we might forget state government in relation to works on Aldenwall Bridge and get on with it ourselves as a local government entity. Can you explain if this is indeed possible, given that the bridge is owned by state government?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. We wouldn't be able to touch the existing bridge without the consent of the state government. And my understanding is that we wouldn't be able to build a separate pedestrian bridge without the consent of the state government either, as it's in with that rail reservation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if that's it, I will now, councillors, there's an officer report before you as set out on the agenda papers. I'm calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor McKern, seconded by Councillor Neely. Would the mover like to speak to the item? Oh, with an amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm delighted that we've had 3 speakers speak to this item tonight. It reveals how important advocacy is for council.
Sorry, councillor, could you speak to the amended recommendation, please?
My apologies to all. We do have an alternative on the screen. And it relates to point number 2. We note that a required change to advocacy priority item 2, Ivanhoe Park Pavilion upgrade. This priority should be listed as Ivanhoe Bowls Club / Ivanhoe Tennis Club Pavilion upgrade, a $2.2 million investment from the state government to upgrade and consolidate the pavilion servicing the Ivanhoe Bowls Club and Ivanhoe Tennis Club at Ivanhoe Recreation Reserve, John Street. It was miswritten, Mayor, in the original document.
Thank you. And is the seconder happy with that? Yes. Okay. And you may speak now.
Okay. Yes, as I was saying, delighted that we've had so many speakers speak to advocacy. It's important. We need to advocate to other levels of government for essentially more, a thunder roll happening. I wonder if that's a good thing, for more and better services for our local communities, as do all local government agencies. And this is why we did endorse our first advocacy framework only last year, a considered, prioritised list of strategically aligned advocacy projects. And it is important to note that, Mayor, that these projects do need to be strategically aligned. And we've already had some wins. It's important for all to note. State government has made a commitment of $32 million to deliver the shared pathway between Monty and Eltham. And with regards to reforms to achieve 7-star thermal performance compliance for all new homes, and incentives to make electric cars more affordable for Australians via the federal government electric car discount bill. Priorities are being asked to we are being asked to endorse tonight represent, in my opinion, Mayor, a municipal-wide list that aligns with our community vision priority themes. I'm comfortable with the list. There are always priority things we can be adding to the list, and this is where I believe, Mayor, it is always useful to hear from our residents to understand what they believe priorities are. And we councillors always welcome thoughts from our community, especially via email, where you can make written appeals and we can consider those as priorities. Just going back to Odenwald Bridge quickly, this has been a long issue, and we hear those residents who are frustrated that nothing's been done. We are working on it. The CEO has explained that only recently she and myself met with the Minister, Anthony Carbines, local member, to advocate further on Odenwald. Unfortunately, MTM, Metro Trains Melbourne, are the responsible authority for that bridge, and they have stated to us that we cannot proceed due to structural issues with the bridge. We would have had to have built screens to put up a pedestrian pathway, which we wanted to do, and that the bridge is not structurally sound to contain those screens. So there are real reasons that we haven't proceeded, and I want you to know we do hear you and we are working on it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Would the second like to speak to the item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is a significant document that highlights and prioritises our priorities, and as Councillor McKern said, it's a municipal-wide list. So we look for opportunities for funding, and we need to maximise the delivery of our programs and infrastructure. So I look at this purely from a holistic perspective, and I haven't, looking at all the list, we've all got our priorities, but I'm not particularly advocating for one in particular. It's important to note that it's a strategic approach, and it's advocacy based on our themes and community input, and how they're impacted through, how people are impacted through change or the need for change in Banyule. So there are some exciting projects on this list, and I'm confident that the team at Council are organised. They're doing all they can to make strong cases, because that's what this report is about, making these strong cases for funding and investment into our municipality, no matter what part of the municipality. I also appreciate from the speakers that we've heard tonight that no advocacy list will tick everybody's box individually, but we will consider, and as councillors, what we do consider is the net community benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Any other councillors? Councillor Garotti?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just had a question actually of officers before I speak. Just in regard to the priority listing, I noticed that a lot of the advocacy is heavily slanted towards state. And I just wonder what the opportunities would be to increase that more toward federal, given that there appears to be a greater capacity within the federal government budget. And just as an example, CEO, in the housing and homelessness, it's to state, but we know that the federal government is very committed in that space. So just seeking a bit of guidance around how that could be tailored in the approach.
Put that to the CEO, I think is best placed to let's talk to that.
Thanks, good question. And through you, Mayor, we are continuing to strengthen our relationships with the federal government, and we'll continue to keep an eye on their policy positions and where funding pools are available. We've recently had a senator out from the federal government to talk about the electrifications of pools in relation to climate change, and that was a very useful meeting. And they've asked us to actually keep case studies, and there's actually a funding round that is coming out at the end of this year that we will put in for. So I think the thing is that we are strengthening our relationships all the time. We're keeping an eye, and we've got a good relationship with Kate Thwaites and her office that are actually keeping us in conversation where opportunities arise for us to advocate and get buy-in from that level of government.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, CEO. Yeah, very happy to support this report. Thank you.
Any other councillors? Councillor De Pasquale.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just mention to the public that this council took it upon itself to bring this report up. Last year we decided to do that. And it's probably, look, I think tonight it's showing us that the advocacy, I think it's spot on. It just needs to continue to be pushed through state members of parliament. I think this advocacy list is going to be very important come elections, because we need to be advocating on behalf of the community during those election periods for government and also opposition too. I think before last year, we would get together every now and then and say, okay, we're advocating for this, we're you know, the train stations, but it wasn't necessarily this formal. So this, I think if the community can understand that it is a more formalised way of doing it, and if they look through this advocacy list or the achievements and they see that it's not quite hitting the mark in certain ways, please let us know so that we can amend, we can continue adding things to it, we can continue coming up with what's been achieved, what's not being achieved, and then what the issues are with whether it be communication or some other issue possibly. So I'm very happy for this to go to the community today for a look by them. Mayor, I thought it was quite encouraging, our speakers tonight. It sort of felt to me like the old days of the public question time, where we'd get members of the public standing up, having their say with regards to what's working, what's not working, and we sort of take that on and put it in our minds so that we can work on these going forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? No, I'll just also note that there were two other items that I think we delivered well for our community in our first annual report back on our advocacy priorities, and that is the electrification of the aquatic centres. That's a really big one, because that's worth millions of dollars potentially to our community. So I think that's really important to report back. We've got that in the next year's priorities as well, and we still need to do work on that. But having the Minister down here to do a photo shoot in our swimming pool is a good indicator that if we continue to work on that advocacy package, we should get a good outcome. Also, the Latrobe NEEC is moving forward. This is the way we're moving forward to create jobs and a strong economy in the Heidelberg, West Heidelberg Business Park Centre. So there's a couple of areas that have been in the background. I think it's so important that we continue to work on those. And in the coming year, some exciting ones that I'd like to raise is just the Rosanna to Heidelberg shared user path that has had some challenges, and that's a big important path that we've got to continue advocacy on. There's 2 netball courts in Ivanhoe Park. Going into my ward now. That's an important one to people in our community that has entered the advocacy package. Odenwood Bridge, we will continue to advocate on all options that helps deliver on that one. And also the heavy vehicle fleet, looking at electrifying that. We just heard an interrupted council meeting by a petrol-driven motorbike out there. The quicker we get them all off the road, the better for many reasons. So looking forward to the federal government assisting us with that as well. Now we move to the papers as per the... Oh, Would the mover like to? No. Yeah, we move to the motion as per the papers and amended. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 3.2, Financial Management Report, a preliminary June 2023 performance. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors, there is an officer report before you as set out on the agenda papers. Yes, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just had a question of appropriate officers. Just in regards to the combined employee costs and agency, just what the total actual EFT figure was and how that compared to budgeted EFT. If that's not available, then if that could be provided to councillors in due course, I'd be grateful.
Could the relevant officer please speak to that?
I don't have, through you, Mayor, I don't have the figure on hand, but I can definitely send that through.
Thank you. Any other questions? I also have a quick question on to the relevant officer around capital works. There's a lot of carryover. Could you please speak to the situation on delivering on that this year?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and through you. Our preliminary number of projects completed in the 22-23 financial year is 80%, which is pretty good. The estimated carryover expenditure is about 33.8 million. However, this figure is yet to be finalised as the audit is still in progress, and the final amount will be reported to councillors in September when it considers the August financial management report. It should be noted that 7 carry-forward projects make up over 2/3 of the carry-forward amount, which those projects include the Watsonia Town Square project, McLeod Park Sports Pavilion and the East Ivanhoe Preschool upgrade. The capital delivery team have reviewed this year's capital program and, subject to material availability, are confident the program can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now seek, if there's no further questions, I'll seek a mover of the motion. Councillor Garotti.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Garotti, seconded by Councillor De Morelos. Councillor, do you have a question? Okay. All right, Councillor, would the mover like to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Happy to speak to the item. So council's delivering and we know it's subject to audit, of course, but still an underlying deficit of $500,000. So that's a good result, but it's not great. It means that we're actually in deficit as a council. And actually, when I look at the results then around employee and agency costs, and I note that what's really pleasing, the councillors have seen this and the gallery will see it in future reporting, but just the combining of agency with employee costs adds a lot more transparency because when you combine the two, we were over on employee costs for the year. And that's why I asked the question around combined EFT. So we know as a council now, we have enormous challenges around our costs. We've ended the year relatively strong. We've continued to pay down debt, which is a real priority for this council. But I'm not sitting back here tonight saying that this is a great set of figures because we're in deficit and our employee costs are running over budget. So I just really wanted to highlight that to the group and to the gallery because we've got a lot of work to do. We adopted a very tight budget. I will call it an optimistic stretch budget. And we know there's going to be already calls upon that later in the year for additional resourcing and EFTs and initiatives. And as stewards of the finances of the council and for our community, I think we're going to have to begin to hold firm a little bit and make sure that we can get back to surplus for the benefit of future generations that are relying on us to do the right thing. So full credit to Alison full credit to Mark and obviously represented by Tony tonight, and to the Director of Corporate Services portfolio. It's not easy to wrap up a result and I think to deliver the result in the circumstances that we've had. So I do really want to just call that out and give a really big thanks and appreciation on behalf of this council. But I think it would be remiss to be going around giving ourselves big pats on the backs about how good we're doing when it was a $500,000 underlying deficit. And we know we've got a lot of work to do to get back to surplus. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the item? Any other councillor? Councillor De Pasquale?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I just wanted to mention to the community that this is the monthly report. This council, there is also data on across the year as well, but it can be quite confusing. I think this council we've made a decision that we're going to present these numbers on a monthly basis to the community, whereas I think the obligation, if I'm not mistaken, is quarterly. Originally, we do an annual report, quarterly report, and then also monthly as well to make sure the community understands exactly what's happening every step of the way. So these management reports come pretty thick and fast every couple of meetings. So anyone in the community is sort of taking, reading them and going through them. That's the information that's within them. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other councillor? I'd just like to correct that. It's the quarterly reports coming back to us. This is the quarterly one, but they are coming quite frequently. If no one else is speaking, look, I'd just like to note that we did go into this financial year with a 4.1 underlying deficit in the budget, and we've actually turned that around. And I think speaking to some of the issues that Councillor Garotti raised is that we have worked hard on it, but there is still way to go. But we've turned it around from a 4.1 underlying deficit to a $500,000 underlying deficit. So I just want to note that. And I think that we went 7/8 of the way there. So we've achieved a lot over this financial year. And also when we're talking about how we analyse our budgets, there's two ways. There's underlying and then there's operating surplus. And I think Council has delivered an operating surplus, which is a $14.5 million budget surplus. And it's 0.5 million unfavourable to that, but we've delivered a $4.5 million surplus, and that's another way of looking at it. So I feel that our officers have done a very good job. Council has been all over trying to reduce deficits and make sure that we get no underlying deficit, but overall, I'm very comfortable with where we've landed. These are difficult economic times, and so that's my perspective as well. And I think we now then will move to the vote on this item. I now then put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 3.3, Banyule Cemeteries Trust, Victorian Protective Data Security Framework attestation obligations. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors, there's an officer report before you as set out on the agenda papers. I think it's as per the agenda papers. Yes? I'm now calling for a motion. Is there a mover? Councillor Garotti, seconded by Councillor De Pasquale.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to move. We're just dropping off point number 2 from the resolution, just purely because it's not good governance for a council to just resolve for a mayor of the day, and it's not directed to an individual, but a blanket approval for a mayor to go approving submissions on behalf of the council. If they have to be signed off by the mayor, they should come back to the council, or otherwise the executive could have requested that the CEO have that delegation. But yeah, very happy with this, but I didn't think it was appropriate to be signing off on the mayor of the day to be signing things without coming back to the full council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And seconder? No? Any other councillors? No, I'm comfortable with the recommendation as it is now as well. All right. That's being said, I now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 3.4, release of IBAC's Operation Sandon, context setting, summary of recommendations and response to notice of motion. There are no speakers to this item this evening. Councillors, there's an officer report before you set out on the agenda papers. And I believe there's an amendment being put forward. Councillor McKern, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Mayor. In relation to this item, which relates to IBAC's Operation Sandon and also a response to a notice of motion put up in June, there are 3 additional points relating to points 4, 5 and 6. Do you wish me to read them out, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Point 4, note that as per the Operation Sandon Special Report, Council formally acknowledges that it has concerns with recommendation 11A made by IBAC to the Minister for Planning to develop and introduce to Parliament amendments to the Planning and Environment Act of 1987 to remove statutory planning decision-making powers. I think there's an error here, Mayor. It doesn't make sense. Decision-making powers matters. It probably matters needs to be deleted. Decision-making powers from councillors and request zip.
It disappears while we're editing it. That'll be returned in 1 second with matters removed.
Point 5, thank you. Thank you, CEO. Note that one of the councillors' key roles is to be involved in the statutory planning processes, and that as representatives of the community, this is an important role that needs to remain. And point 6, request advocacy to occur immediately on recommendation 11A to all local government peak bodies, the Minister for Planning and the Minister for Local Government, and promote this position to the Banyule community through various communication channels, including social media and the Banyule banner. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? I'm happy to second this one. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. Operation Sandon, and you'd be most familiar with this, the recommendations brought forward by IBAC in response to corrupt conduct by the City of Casey, where councillors were shown to have accepted payments from a developer for favourable planning outcomes. This led to 34 recommendations to reform local government governance and planning systems for greater integrity and transparency. Whilst, Mayor, I have no objection to some of the proposed reforms, I think we need to bear in mind that Banyule is a very different council to Casey and other urban fringe councils, where there is considerable pressure to rezone land from agricultural to industrial or industrial to residential. Banyule, however, is an established area which is already largely residential. I raised a NOM in June specifically targeting the anticipated recommendation calling for removal of councillors' statutory planning powers and responsibilities. This has indeed now come to light as recommendation 11A. Representing the community on statutory planning matters is an important power and responsibility, Mayor, that's bestowed upon us councillors, and to remove this power, I believe, could silence the voice of our people and could see the end of third-party appeal rights. I ask you, fellow councillors, what price democracy? Some say democracy has no price, that respectful freedom of speech, of debate and representation is priceless. This is what I think we should be fighting for here and why the alternative motion has been inserted. For the voice of our people to be heard in statutory planning, we need to retain planning powers with our councillors. That said, these powers are never taken lightly by our councillors. They are used with a sincere level of discretion, given that most planning applications are indeed delegated to council officers to determine. In the past year, only 6 planning applications were called into council by councillors in Banyule. Yet the state government seems to believe that by removing councillor powers, a lot more affordable housing will be available in Melbourne suburbs. Could it, however, lead to more developer power? Could it lead to less consideration of values communities hold dear, such as the character of their neighbourhoods, the urban design standards of new builds that they would like to see, and most importantly, could the IBAC recommendations lead to further community alienation from democratic process? Is this indeed what we want for Banyule?
Thank you, Councillor. Now I'll reserve my comments, and any other councillors would like to speak to this item. Councillor Garotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, happy with the amendments that have been raised by Councillor McKern, and noting as well, and just confirming, that we will be getting a follow-up report, because yes, while there are concerns with recommendation 11, there's also concerns from council and officers, and I think the sector around other recommendations, in particular recommendation 22, which could severely constrain the way that councils work in practice, and recommendation 34, that, if implemented to the letter, would effectively mean a majority of non-elected people would have effectively recruit the CEOs of councils. So happy that with what we're doing, and happy at this stage to emphasise concerns with recommendation 11 and commence that advocacy process. But I do just want to say that there are other concerns that we have, and no doubt others in the sector have, and I think it'll be equally important to advocate on those areas, particularly given that the state government may have a very strong view on planning, but may be more open to working with the sector on some of the other areas of concern. But otherwise, happy to endorse what's been put forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Neely.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to also say that it's unfortunate that the actions of one council have been detrimental, which has kick-started this report, though it is a necessary report. And as a councillor, I'd like to ensure that, all behaviours and actions of a council are appropriate and accountable to increase transparency and good conduct. The report highlights that councils have systemic vulnerabilities and they need to be addressed. And this document aims to address corruption risks with an aim to reducing them, but acknowledging that you can never fully eliminate all vulnerabilities. We want to reduce corruption risks. We want to strengthen governance. We want to strengthen transparency through training, due diligence, advice, rather than restricting councillors, like as mentioned in recommendation 11A, to beyond a reasonable level. We don't want a situation of overreaching. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Councillor De Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, unfortunately, this is a situation where there's a few who did the wrong thing, or supposedly did the wrong thing, and that's going through process. But effectively, these types of issues should be taken care of by punishments. With regards to councillors, if someone comes to us and offers us money for some form of application, that's effectively a bribe, and that has jail term and fines associated with that if convicted. So it's not something that we ever want to get anywhere close to. So unfortunately, the state government, IBAC investigate, and to see what was done wrong, etc., and then possibly tighten the strings for all councils, even councils who aren't doing the wrong things. Where this will go is anybody's guess, but if councils are taken out of the picture to where someone applies for a planning permit or an application for to build something, and that is in state hands, it's almost like it may come to a point where it's being assessed by a state government body or some body associated with the state government, and then if there is arbitration that is needed or if they want to challenge that, they then go to VCAT, which is another the state government. So we then lose a lot of our the regulations that we at Banyule have spent many years and many dollars implementing, the Banyule planning scheme and things that we as residents want to see in our community. So, yeah, very interesting situation. So I think if, just a bit of background, Mayor, for our residents who don't really understand what this is all about, it's going to be very interesting in the months ahead. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? No, I'll just speak. Look, I thank Councillor McKern and Garotti for articulating three very important areas that this recommendation set may impact. Now, this is a massive worrying situation where a significant amount of authority can be taken away from the closest level of government to our community and brought to one or two members of the state government. And what we don't want to see is consolidation of power anywhere in any level of government, but a balance. And I think it's absolutely essential that we represent ourselves as strongly as possible on this issue. And on the planning matter, I'm very supportive of the alternative recommendation Councillor McKern has put forward. We need to advocate for this. We have a strong position on defending our community's planning opportunities to participate. And on governance, I think the Sandon report does actually articulate some very good things for us to take on board. And we can move forward on improving governance in a range of matters that come to council. And once again, increasing the transparency. And local government certainly is a leader of the three governments when it comes to transparency. I'd finally like to conclude that I'm very comfortable with the advocacy being put forward by MAV, LG Pro and VLGA, and the regular meetings and advice that they're providing on this. And so there's a tremendous amount of work going on, but we as a council also need to put a line in the sand what we think needs to be said and our position. So very happy with the recommendation as per the papers and amended. I now then put this motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 3.5, record of councillor meetings. There are no speakers on this item. Councillors, there's an officer report before you as set out in the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor Champion, seconded by Councillor De Pasquale. Would the mover like to speak to the item? Seconder? No? Any other councillors? No? I now then put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 4.1, carols by candlelight. There are three speakers to this item this evening. John Walkley will address the council in person, speaking against the recommendation. John, please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. I rise to speak on behalf of the children of Ivanhoe, East Ivanhoe, Heidelberg and Eaglemont, who don't need to trek all the way out to Greensborough to have their annual carols by candlelight. I'm particularly intrigued as to why there's a leap in one fell swoop from Ivanhoe Park out to Greensborough War Memorial Park. Why has the word permanent crept into the resolution? Is this council to be forbidden from addressing the matter further after this resolution is put? Is a future council constrained from addressing the matter? Permanent. I don't follow every council resolution, but to see the word permanent creep in has raised my eyebrows. Ivanhoe Park is said to be undersized and lacks appropriate infrastructure. What a gross oversight to not use the Heidelberg United Soccer Stadium. It has a central location. It has a 12,000 person capacity, double this poxy little Greensborough War Memorial Park. It has 1,000 seating capacity. It has lighting. It has viewing. It has catering. It has toilets. It has parking. And the public, through state government and this council, have tipped in millions and millions of dollars to upgrade that stadium. I'd suggest that the boulevard lights have created heritage for Banyule, southern Banyule in particular. People come from right across Melbourne. The adjacent Ivanhoe Park, where the carols have traditionally been held, has been perfectly effective. It is a poke in the eye to the residents of southern Banyule to say, no, we are uplifting this night and shifting it out to the Greensborough War Memorial Park. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I think we'll have some information to speak to some of the items that you raised just then. We now move on to Michael Smith from Friends of Banyule, who has a written statement and is speaking against the recommendation. The written statement will now be read out by Natasha Swan, Director of City Developments. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been a Banyule ratepayer for 30 years and a public relations professional for 25 years. I believe councillors will be making a mistake by adopting item 4.1, thereby abandoning future carols by candlelight events at Ivanhoe Park. Banyule, a growing municipality with large distances between the northern and southern boundaries, should run 2 carols evenings, one in the north, in Greensborough, and one in the south, Ivanhoe Park. Residents in the 2 southern wards are feeling increasingly neglected by council when it comes to community celebrations. The Ivanhoe Shopping Strip Fiesta was abandoned a decade ago. Now council wants to axe the carols. Hundreds of new residents are moving into new apartment complexes along Heidelberg Road, and it is embarrassing when they ask us where they can participate in local community celebrations because we do not have an answer. 2 carols evenings would solve the congestion and traffic problems associated with previous carol evenings, yet there would still be good attendance because of the steady stream of new residents and the underlying support from the many families associated with local schools and sporting clubs. The event should include a brief segment welcoming new Banyule residents, a gesture in keeping with the spirit of Christmas.
Thank you. And next up we have Sharon Henderson has a written statement and is speaking against the recommendation. The written statement will now be read out by Darren Bennett, Director of City Assets and Services.
Thank you for all the work you have done in bringing the people of Ivanhoe and the Greater Banyule together. I'm particularly concerned with how each neighbourhood is currently becoming more separate and distant from each other. I'd love to see some effort to bring communities across suburbs together. I think one of the best ways to work with neighbouring suburbs. The Christmas carols and lights in Ivanhoe have been a well-attended tradition that have united people of all ages and cultures across Mid and South Banyule, a mix of richest and poorest, and I'm concerned that this cultural grassroots phenomenon will be lost. Ivanhoe has hosted the Christmas lights and Christmas carols together for many years. It has been widely enjoyed by many people from Heidelberg, Viewbank, Rosanna, Heidelberg West, Heidelberg Heights, Ivanhoe and the surrounding suburbs. From working based in Ivanhoe and living in Viewbank to now working in Heidelberg West and meeting many of the residents of South and Mid Banyule, I understand how isolating it can be even within a great area that is Banyule. This is especially true since COVID. Children hear about it from their schools, families, carpool together and sing and walk and marvel at the boulevard lights. The proof has been in the request for more traffic management in the area over the time. It has always been a beautiful time of neighbours from different nationalities coming together to enjoy the generous efforts of the boulevard residents to dazzle all people, young and old, together. I understand that Greensborough is the suburb of choice for the carols this year, but please do not forget the tradition and wonderful experience that the people of Ivanhoe have made available for the mid and south of Banyule. The event itself in Ivanhoe is a warm and welcoming environment. Greensborough, the other end of the Shire, is perhaps not as familiar.
Thank you. Now, do we have any questions? No, then I'll move, there's an officer report before you as set out in the agenda papers, but I believe there is an amendment. Could we please see that? Do we have a mover of an amended recommendation? Councillor McKern?
Held in southern Banyule. I hope you all heard me regardless of the microphone.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Councillor De Morelos. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. 3 speakers, the maximum allowed, speaking against this item. And the speakers are from a variety of areas, mid and south. Ivanhoe, Viewbank, working in Heidelberg West. I think that speaks a lot to us, Mayor. And it also reminds us that festivals and celebrations are often seen as a mark of a healthy community, bringing people together, fostering connectivity, diversity, joy, celebrating different cultures, beliefs, bodies, sexualities, ages and genders. You've all heard that before as part of our diversity statement, and that's what festivals and celebrations help us to achieve. And the carols, the Christmas carols, are one of the highlight of Banyule's festival program, a festival for people from all corners of the municipality. So I can understand, Mayor, how it inspires so much comment and reaction from our community. Ultimately, it does take 40 minutes to drive from Ivanhoe to Greensborough, an hour to take the train. I know, I've done it many times. And I do ask how inclusive this is. And given that the fastest growing areas of the municipality over the next 15 years, where our municipality is proposed to increase by 30,000 residents, the majority of those, or rather the largest growth areas in Banyule over the next 15 years are in the suburbs of Heidelberg and Ivanhoe. So I think if indeed we are honest about our inclusivity strategic position, Mayor, that we will be looking for a festival in both the north and south so that all of us can indeed participate equally.
Thank you, Councillor. Would the second like to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just briefly. So my biggest thing on this was changing the word permanently. Who knows what's going to happen in the future and allowing the flexibility. But in my eyes, this is an operational thing and probably not something that needs to keep coming to council because it is like any other festival that we do run. So allowing that requesting officers to explore other options going forward lets the officers take charge of this going forward. And I do believe that there is possibilities of different things going forward. So making sure that it wasn't permanent. Thanks.
Thank you, councillors. Any other councillors? Councillor Neely?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I wasn't going to speak to this tonight or even vote on this tonight because I'm not interested in getting involved in a turf war across the municipality. We look for activities and opportunities for people municipal-wide. And I have trust in the arts and culture team to make logistical decisions based on facts and, you know, capacity and what's beneficial for as many residents as possible. So, you know, there are parts of Banyule that don't have any festivals in it, but I'm not going to mention those because that's not what this is about. It's not about suburb, and it's not about anything other than suitability of the site. And yeah, I will vote purely because it's come to council, but not keen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Councillor Grotti?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A quick observation. I find it interesting where the focus is of some speakers. So a bridge and a festival in a meeting where we're looking at the finances of the council, our jobs and inclusive program, and obviously Operation Sandown recommendations. So just an interesting observation for me. I take exception to a remark made by a speaker calling the War Memorial Park poxy. That's definition worthless. Well, they're diggers that helped build that reserve. That's an RSL reserve. I find that language absolutely appalling, and I'm offended by that on behalf of those who have gone to build that reserve. So I'd like that noted, Mayor. In my view, this is an operational matter, and I think I've sort of made that point clear in discussion, but it clearly is a matter that has a lot of community interest. I can certainly see where Councillor McKern is coming from, and I think with Councillor De Morales has looked to try and come towards some sort of compromise that keeps open the opportunity of doing something. I know that it is in the south of Banyule, but hopefully when the officer report comes back, there's a bit of a broader lens on that. And so in the context of being supportive and collaborative and trying to work through a solution, I am happy to support what's being put forward tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Councillor Grotti? No, Councillor De Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm glad we're having this conversation because it highlights to me that Christ is alive and we should be celebrating that. And I think that's the major thing and the important thing. Now, I think I understand why officers have put the word permanently there, but I don't know whether there can be some other way to encompass what the intent is. The intent is to have something which can be planned forward. So our Carols by Candlelight has become bigger than it originally was. I mean, in the years gone past, it was a much smaller event. It had been held at different locations. I mean, over the years, we had a Carols by Candlelight in the town square in Greensborough. We had one at Poulter Reserve. It went to Ivanhoe again. So it's been to different locations. But I remember the first one back at Ivanhoe when the big stage was ordered and paid for, and that actually caused a fair bit of issue on the oval. It damaged the oval. And so that was an issue for that big stage. Now, so the Carols event has become bigger than it originally was, so it's harder to facilitate now. So if there's some other way to encompass permanently can always be changed with a notice of motion or another report or, resolution. Nothing is ever permanent. But maybe it's the way that officers are trying to get a little bit of forward thinking to keep costs down, because if they order the stage a year in advance, it's going to be cheaper. If they get food trucks organised a year in advance, it's going to be cheaper. All these logistics will be much more effective if it's just not ad hoc and it's been planned with a month or 3 months out. Having said that, when the Carols were in Ivanhoe one of those years, myself and some community members used the Greensborough Anglican Church as a place where the northern area could do a Carols by Candlelight. So we sort of tapped into them. So there's plenty of opportunities. Once again, I think the important thing, Mary, is that people are celebrating. Let's get back into our churches, because all our churches will have Carols by Candlelight, and that's something that I think people should look to as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Councillor Metsanikos.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I've attended both carols at Ivanhoe and Greensborough several times. They're both great events, but the increase in the popularity has meant that, you know, it's jumped from 3,000 to 6,000 people over the past 2 years. And, you know, that's great. It's great to see people getting out there, but if it continues at Ivanhoe, then it means that there's going to be people who miss out, and that's also not fair, because there are lots of other families who want to have, you know, the ability to go to these things. So just, yeah, looking forward with, you know, just, I guess, being able to include everybody wherever it's at. And, you know, let's hope it gets up to 10,000, and then we've got another problem. We can be going, well, it's so big now that we've got to find somewhere else. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? I'll just finish up that I believe that Ivanhoe Park is the best place for this event. It's a wonderful location for every reason, and I think it could have been accommodated there. And both Councillor McKern and myself fought very hard to try and keep it there. But the officer's report puts us in a very challenging situation where recommendation is to move it up to Greensborough. And it's absolutely essential that we enable the opportunity for events to be spread across Banyule equally. And I'm very supportive of events up there, and I'm supportive of it being in Greensborough, but at the same time, I don't like to see a very important event that's got a long cultural heritage back down in the southern part or in Ivanhoe Park and connected with the boulevard lights. So it's very disappointing to see that. But at the same time, when a resident says something very disrespectful to other important loved areas in other wards, it's absolutely important to call that out, and thank you, Councillor Garotti, for doing that. We as councillors need to be respectful to everyone, every place in Banyule. Diversity is important, and we need to respect that. And I think I completely agree with you that we need our audience to also assist in being respectful to other parts of Banyule. And I'm comfortable with the recommendation that hopefully we can see a continued council-led event down in the southern part to work into the Christmas spirit that we did have when we had Ivanhoe Park as the host for carols. So that being said, I'll now then put the motion, unless the speaker wishes to write a reply.
I think you've wrapped up well, Mayor.
Okay. All right. I now then put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 4.2, Creative Banyule Draft Arts and Culture Strategy 2023 to 2031. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors, there is an officer report before you as set out on the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor Neely, seconded by Councillor Champion. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. A lot of planning's gone into this, including the Council's Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, made up of Banyule residents who have a real passion and expertise in the arts and culture area. I'd like to stress the importance of arts and culture as a community building, socially cohesive belonging to a collective cultural capital, like a neighbourhood identity, with direct links to health and wellbeing outcomes, like our workshops. An example is Reels on Wheels, projector bike tours, contributing to the local economy, tourism, education, knowledge, skills. So lots of really good reasons. And this draft strategy is out for community consultation. It's important to hear from the community and put structure around these wonderful programs. We want to see growth, and we want to see growth in output, and how to facilitate that growth is important. I'd also like to thank Hannes, Georgie, all of those involved in all of this work, and I'm very supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the second like to speak?
Thanks, Mayor. I will speak very, very briefly, just to acknowledge the work gone into this draft proposal. Please note, it is a draft. We're asking all our community to please contribute who have an interest in arts and culture. And I know some of you actually contact me directly. Every now and then, I'm sure you contact my fellow councillors with your thoughts and advice and wants. This is your opportunity to please comment. So please, right away, tell us what you think, tell us what you like, tell us what you'd like to see changed. The opportunity will conclude on the 1st of October, and then a couple of meetings later, this will come back to council to be endorsed, voted for. So please, please, please contribute. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillors? No, I'll just sum up quickly that this is an important plan for council. It's a 10-year plan. And when I see a 10-year plan, I get worried we're going to be locked in to outcomes. But in reading the report, it was very good to see that the action plan will be developed and evaluated and adapted each year to respond to the events of the year. And I think that's a really good way to move forward, but have a long-term strategy laid out in front of us. So I'm very supportive of this, and well done to the team, Hannes and Georgie, sitting in the audience tonight. Thank you. I can't say that there's many strategies that get me excited like this one does, so thank you. And with that, I'll now go to the next bit, which is I will now put the motion as per the papers. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Just need to count everybody's vote. Just noticed that I didn't see Councillor Garotti's hand go up.
It's up. Thank you, Governance, keeping a sharp eye on us all. We are now moving on to item 4.3, Watsonia After Dark Final Report. There is one speaker to this item this evening. Lucy Holden from Watsonia Neighbourhood House has submitted a written statement and is speaking for the recommendation. The written statement will now be read out by Darren Bennett, Director of Assets and City Services.
I would like to thank Council for taking action in minimising harm associated with gambling losses. Gambling is a key public health issue, with over $8 million spent on electronic gaming machines in Watsonia last year and nearly $40 million across Banyule. Problem gambling can cause mental and physical ill health, lead to breakdown of relationships and increase social isolation. As an organisation that provides Banyule to support to Banyule's most vulnerable residents, we know firsthand the profound impact of social isolation. Social isolation can make individuals more vulnerable to gambling harm through lack of social support systems that protect against unhealthy gambling behaviours. Council provided us with funding to extend our opening hours and provide alternative safe spaces to foster social connection. We were able to connect with residents who we may not have otherwise reached. We had strong feedback that participants gained a greater sense of belonging in the Watsonia community and that our activities enabled meaningful social connection and opportunities for self-care. I extend my thanks to Sharon Prinzi and Danielle Clark for their support during the program. I'd also like to thank Lynn Sakika from Watsonia Library, with whom I worked closely on this project. I acknowledge the work of Joe Van Dort, Council's previous health planner, who conceived this project. Council should be commended for their work in contributing to evidence-based interventions to reduce gambling harm. I'd like to conclude my submission by sharing the words from two community members. For me, it helps me get out of a bad place and spend time in a comfortable, safe place. I like spending time with friendly people, having a laugh and doing something productive. The provision of such a beautiful, inclusive space is incredibly important for connection with others. It is where I connect with other carers and feel that others understand what I'm going through and feel safe and seen. Thank you.
Thank you. Just in time. Now, councillors, there's an officer report before you set out on the agenda papers. I'm calling for a motion. Do we have a mover? Councillor De Pasquale, seconded by Councillor Mitsonikos. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I definitely want to acknowledge the Watsonia Neighbourhood House, Lucy Holden down there and all her support staff, many volunteers. Also the staff at Watsonia Library. So, Mayor, this was an initiative that so funding came through from the state government, a gambling harm initiative to offer those in our community a place to go of an evening where instead of going to the pokies or to have a punt, to go to these places, be there with other people, and really get out of that environment that I think is for so many is quite toxic. Now, it may seem like a small thing, Mayor, but since poker machines came to our municipality a few years ago now. I mean, I remember growing up as a child having to on trips in the bus up to New South Wales to play the pokies. The kids these days don't understand what that was like. The pokies are everywhere. So when they turn 18 and they're able to go into clubs, pubs, etc., they're going to be exposed already to, we have more poker machines per capita than anywhere else in the world. And these machines are addictive. Some of the reports that we've read on how addictive these machines are and the strategies they use to draw people in, it's very toxic. It's like a drug, Mayor. It's the dopamine hit that people are actually after. So I would like to see this program in some form go ahead. I think if our library and Watsonia Neighbourhood House, possibly all the neighbourhood houses, could possibly get together and nut out how some strategy could be put together. I don't think the cost will be, it can't be run as the program was run before, but maybe something could be offered to the community so that there was over 2,000 people in our municipality that took part in this program. So that's a lot. So the need is definitely there. And unfortunately, the numbers the reports of the numbers of money that's being lost at the poker machines is continually going up and going up and going up. So the need is going to continually be there. So, look, it's unfortunate that this is ending. It's very, very successful. I want to acknowledge those who are part of it, those who held the sessions, all the support that they gave to people in the community. For those in the community who have issues with gambling, etc., and did find this program or would like another program to be there for them, please contact council because we would love to hear from you. We definitely want to advocate in this area very strongly. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Would the second like to speak?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just also wanted to say thanks to Lucy and all those involved in this program. It's a great program to give people other options instead of gambling and help alleviate loneliness and improve mental health and also just to connect locals and get people being connected together. The running of this program allowed them to connect with these community members who may otherwise have gone to a gambling venue just as a way of surrounding themselves with people and so they weren't alone. But the case studies that I read showed that it was a valuable program and it helped many people who work during the day and can't actually get out and go and do other activities. It gave them a chance to, at night time, go and do an event and then connect with others and maybe make lifelong friendships. I'd also love to see this continue. Thanks.
Any other councillors? Councillor Garotti?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and very well spoken by Councillor De Pasquale and Councillor Mitsonikos. I know that there's a good chance that Lucy's probably at home watching this or will certainly watch a recording of it and just perhaps encourage her in the neighbourhood house and Julie Williams as well, who's the coordinator of neighbourhood houses in the region, just to perhaps reflect on the feedback from Councillor De Pasquale. We've got a budget, we've just adopted a budget, but when we very quickly then roll into the new budget, to look at a submission. And if there's an idea there from the neighbourhood houses around how they think this could work, certainly encourage them to put that forward as part of the budget process. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other councillors? Councillor Neely?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it was great that the participants were interviewed about their personal experience in the program and that there were over 2,000 recorded participants from people of all ages and different abilities. And, you know, we talk about data and data driving us and what we do, but it was hard to measure whether this had a direct impact on gambling minimisation. But in nature, these programs are so valuable, or extremely valuable, as they really help people. And we don't always know to what effect or as to how much. Some programs are really hard to measure. I know I was speaking to Lucy about the neighbourhood house, just offering some food and not, knowing how many people would actually just drop in during the day to access something that they really needed, but didn't want to say, I'm hungry, I've got financial issues. So a lot of people don't want to talk about what's really happening in their lives, which is so understandable. So if you want to talk data, does address community connectedness. So I'd also like to see this great work continue. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Champion.
Thanks very much, Mayor. As the chair this year of the Yarra Plenty Regional Library Board, I'd just like to acknowledge the staff of the Yarra Plenty Regional Library there in Watsonia, the work that they have contributed to this significant activity. It's not just the report, it's the actual activity. So I would like to thank them. I know that the CEO of the Yarra Plenty Regional Library, Jane, would love to hear about this, hear this result, so we will share this with her on Thursday evening at our meeting. Her value is safety. So to hear that anybody who's participated in the Watsonia After Dark event feels safe, for her, the Yarra Plenty Regional Library has achieved what it has needed to achieve. It is very important that everybody who attends the library feels safe, as well as welcome, as well as included. So thank you very much to the staff for contributing to this, and also obviously to our officers for completing the final report. And as Councillor Rick says, who is also on the board with me, there is another budget coming. We would love another submission to this if you believe in it so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? No, I think most of it was said. I'll just say that it's very important that we have activities for our community and inclusive, welcoming options for people all through the day and the evenings. And so this is a really important program. I'd like to see something into the future to avoid people that are vulnerable to gambling available in the evenings. I think it's really important. And that might come about as we address our gambling strategy coming to council in the next few months. So I think that covers everything. Everyone else has said it all. And I'd just like to note that Councillor De Pasquale would like to thank the library in Watsonia as well. He forgot that when he was speaking.
Yeah, and just that the library are actually continuing to run extended hours to follow on the program a little bit too. So anyone has questions or would like to get in touch with the library can do it at the Watsonia Library.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I will now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 4.4, Inclusive Banyule Plan Year 1 Achievement Report. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors, there's an officer report before you as set out in the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Councillor Garotti, seconded Councillor Neely. Mover would like to speak.
Yeah, happy to note the report and the great work done. And Kath, on behalf of the council, please do pass on our sincere thanks and appreciation for the really good work that's being done. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Would the second like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. In this report, there are important key projects that were delivered, namely the inclusive seminars, diversity and inclusion training, and the universal access infrastructure improvements, very noteworthy. And it's an example of council working hard to reduce barriers. Barriers are still there, but we're trying to reduce barriers to inclusion. We've got a responsibility to provide opportunities and reduce inequalities wherever we can, and that means removing discrimination and systems that promote or support inequality. So I would like to see more tangible resources going forward in continuation to what's already happened, which is wonderful, and improving on our key initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Pasquale?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to mention that we had an extensive briefing on the disability website review and the building of that out. I was quite impressed, Mayor, with regards to how far that has come and how that actually is helping members of our community who are with disabilities. Yeah, thank you very much to the team who was putting that together. Sharon Prinsey, Sean, thank you very much for all your work, you and your team. Keep it up. I think the next 6 to 12 months is very exciting for many in our municipality. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other one? Now, I'd just like to mention there are 10 groups that make up our Inclusive Banyule Strategy key advisory groups, and those are LGBTIQA+, multicultural, people experiencing homelessness, people experiencing poverty, faith communities, people with disability, and older adults. So there's quite a group of people that benefit from this strategy. And in year one, the action plan included 26 actions, of which 21 were delivered, and the remaining 5 are to be continued in the coming year. So I'd just like to thank all the team that played a role in delivering our first year and the ongoing work in this space. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 4.5, draft resilient and safe Banyule framework, update and request for public consultation. There are no speakers to this item this evening. Councillors, there's an officer report before you as set out on the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Councillor Garotti, seconded Councillor De Pasquale.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Happy to recommend this motion and to put it out for public consultation. What this framework does is bring together a whole range of existing strategies and policies and approaches into one consistent framework. So it's not a new thing per se that Council's doing, but hopefully a way of better coordinating and more efficiently coordinating the existing activities that we're already doing. So fully commend to the officers for actually pulling together the framework and looking at it in this way, and certainly looking forward to any feedback that might arise through the public consultation process. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Seconder, would like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yes, this framework does replace the Safer Banyule plan. So this is This goes out for community consultation now for 6 weeks, I believe, on shaping Banyule. Can have members of the community can read it and put feedback through there. Also, just contact either councillors, council office if you have feedback and you, that type of technology doesn't suit. Yeah, looking forward to see what this comes back with. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other councillors? No, I'd just like to quickly say that I think it's a great idea now we include resilience as part of the strategy title. It's important to be proactive and avoid the problems in the first place. So I think that's a great addition, and then work on some of the challenges that do arise when we've done all the hard work, and that's dealing with safety on the other end, the pointy stick end of the framework. So with that, I'd just like to put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move on to item 6.1, 2 and 4 Carlisle Crescent Belfield, proposed 4-storey apartment development, P2 2023. There are 4 speakers to this item this evening. We first up have Chris McKenzie from Melbourne Planning Solutions, will address the council in person and is speaking for the recommendation. Chris, please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Look, thanks for that. The application before you is proposing a 4-storey, 25 apartment development on a 2-lot site opposite Ford Park. For about 4 years, from 2017 to 2020, Council undertook a significant strategic planning process in postcode 3081 with community consultation, formal reports, multiple council resolutions that led to a planning scheme amendment being adopted. That introduced the residential growth zone and design overlays into a series of areas in Belfield and Heidelberg West. This area around Ford Park is one of those identified growth zone areas. So we recognise the proposal before you is quite different than the more typical townhouse developments that you and the community would be familiar with seeing in Heidelberg West and Belfield. It's important to understand the reason it's different is because the planning scheme specifically asks for something different on this particular site as part of that Ford Park environment. The growth zone and the DDO are directly asking for a 4-storey apartment building around Ford Park. They're specifically discouraging underdevelopment of these identified sites. So this is not a situation where the applicant's trying to push past the planning policies and do something beyond what the scheme is asking for. It's a situation where the proposal is directly responding to what the planning scheme is seeking. So for tonight's meeting, the Planning Department has prepared a detailed final assessment. It supports the proposal for approval. All of Council's internal referral departments, Traffic, Waste, ESD, Urban Design, Arborist, have all supported the proposal for approval. So it's a well-considered and highly compliant response to what your scheme is asking for on this site. So my client, the permit applicant, is wanting to deliver what Council and the planning scheme have asked for. So I encourage you to acknowledge that and to support this proposal and the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sebastian Alexakis, will address council in person, speaking against the recommendation. Sebastian, please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors and officers. My name is Sebastian Alexakis and my sister and I are owners of the adjoining property at 6 Carlisle Crescent. Our objections to the proposal have been raised in the past and form part of the council record. Following consultation meeting, the applicant lodged amended plans. However, these do not provide for any significant change to the proposal. One of the main objectives of the residential growth zone and the DDO 16 is to ensure the scale and form of development achieves a preferred character for the area and manages the potential adverse amenity impacts on adjoining residential properties for an appropriate built form transition. The development fails to achieve this. The western elevation facing our property provides for part shear wall presentation for 3 stories with only a token site back at the upper level. The building will be 12.36 metres high and stretch the length of our property. This is not an acceptable transition and will result in unacceptable visual bulk. In relation to overlooking, the proposal relies on providing a 2.7 metre high fence along our boundary to avoid overlooking. A fence of this height has never been discussed or agreed with us. This is an unacceptable outcome from our perspective as we do not wish to provide a fence of that height on our boundary. Therefore, the overlooking diagrams provided are misleading and all balconies and windows should be screened appropriately. We have concerns that all the car parking and traffic, including the associated noise impact, is directed along the side street directly abutting our property. Noise and impact of vehicle movements will significantly impact our amenity. In summary, the proposal is an overdevelopment and fails to provide an acceptable transition to our property. The design fails to consider the sensitive interface to our property in terms of visual bulk, overlooking, and the location of car parking access. The design should be revised and reduced in scale to achieve an acceptable outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a quick question for the speaker. You mentioned about a fence. You're objecting to its existence of 2.7 metres or having you consider if it was all paid for by the developer? Okay. Okay, thank you. We have another question for the speaker. Would you like to approach the lectern?
Thank you for your statement.
Not a problem.
You mentioned reduction in scale is being sought. Can you be a bit clearer about what sort of scale you would see as acceptable?
Okay. Well, with many of the objectors that I've spoken with, and it's been noted that 89 people have objected to this proposal. Many people are seeking something that's similar to what's already been done, say 2 stories and so on. For me, there was another development done on Oriole Road that was 3-story townhouses, and I think for me personally, that would be more acceptable medium.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Next up, we have Marie Cyr Trenton, will address council in person and is speaking against the recommendation. Marie, please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Good evening. The Banyule Strategic Plan identifies that the preferred future character of Belfield requires the positioning of new dwellings in keeping with the front setbacks of dwellings along the street. Along Carlisle Crescent, the standard setback is 8 metres, and this will provide sufficient space for tree planting, and the designing of the site layout, including the basements, should provide spacing between the dwellings that allows for the planting and future growth of trees to maturity. The proposed development at 2 and 4 Carlisle fails to adhere to either of these requirements and places the opportunity for trees to grow to maturity at risk, which also threatens the biodiversity of the area, and the development will remove the developer's statement says that it will remove all vegetation from the site. Hence, there will be no mature trees or vegetation maintained to support habitat, and this will reduce the ability for future greenhouse gases to be absorbed and remove the quality and the opportunity for shading to reduce the increased solid building materials and bulk that will be present on the site. In order to achieve the aesthetic and environmental goals identified for future Banyule character, the contribution made by the presence of significant trees is substantial. The advice provided by the Planning Department identified that the minimal setback required for trees to grow to their mature height and contribute to the green canopy that we all desire is 6 metres. 6 metre setback will allow, needs to include the basement. The basement of this plan exceeds the external walls of the building, and it needs to be reduced to allow a 6 metre setback, and that will allow deep soil access for tree root growth. A 25% of the site should allow for deep soil access for tree roots to grow. Significant canopy trees contribute to the character of the area, particularly in front setbacks. The environmental benefits from allowing significant trees to mature will ensure that this character of the area is maintained. 2 to 4 Carlisle Crescent is the ideal place to support mature trees to grow with a 6 metre setback, and there are no power lines present along either boundary of Carlisle or Davidson Street.
Thank you. Next up, we have Andrew Podbury, will address council in person, speaking against the recommendation. Thank you. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors and officers. My name is Andrew Podbury. My wife and my kids and I live in Belfield in Davidson Street. Our objections pertain to 3 or several key areas. Firstly, the neighbourhood character with respect to the density, size and scale of the proposed development and the lack of appropriate transition to the surrounding dwellings. Amenity impacts including visual bulk, car parking and traffic concerns. Following consultation, the applicant submitted some revised plans which we feel didn't make any substantial changes and were cosmetic at best. As mentioned by Sebastian, the DDO 16 talks about appropriate built form transition, and that's something for you as councillors to determine. We feel that this proposed development fails to achieve that in many respects with relation to height, lack of landscaping, visual bulk, site coverage, therefore not an acceptable transition and unacceptable visual bulk. Fundamentally, the area is populated by single dwellings with or newer townhouses, which are at most 1 or 2 levels or stories in height. In my views, to suggest going from single and double story homes and townhouses to a 4 level redevelopment is not an appropriate transition and quite illogical. We have concerns about the local amenity also, in so much as whilst the site does abut a park, the reality is these are small side streets. They're not really designed for high volume of traffic, and it's already quite congested in the area with the local Ford Park redevelopment and the increased traffic as a result of that. In addition to the fact that we're not within close proximity of mass transit, which is also likely to result in higher car use than would otherwise be the case if you were developing, let's say, near the Coles Ivanhoe, as many developments have been done, which is within walking distance of mass transit at the train station. So in summary, we feel the overdevelopment is an unacceptable transition to the surrounding properties and think it should be redeveloped or redesigned. And we share our ward councillor's previous comments about making sure we don't overdevelop the area and lose what we love about Belfield. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all the speakers. Sounds like you've got a few in the audience that didn't speak as well this evening. Now, councillors, there's an officer report before you as set out in the agenda papers, and I believe that there is an amended recommendation.
Yes, Mayor, there is. So there's recommendation A and the recommendation B, which is at the bottom. A is as is, and then B. The council seek a report outlining opportunities to review the state government investment in public transport within the postcode 3081 area with respect to the housing projections that supported the 3081 urban design framework. Council undertake traffic counts on Carlisle Crescent, Davidson Street, Harrison Street and Liberty Parade prior to the development commencing. And 3, council's transport engineering team undertake a review of parking and the need for parking restrictions in the surrounding area in accordance with council's on-street parking management framework 6 months after the completion of the development. So moved.
Thank you, councillor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Garotti. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So this is a very difficult one, and as we've just heard from a few of the residents, and I know there was a lot more that wanted to speak, but governance allows only for 3, that there is a lot of disconnection between the policy, the urban 3081 policy, and this, and in particular this development. This development is, as Sebastian mentioned, is 12.7 metres high. They can go to 14.5 based on the 301 urban policy and the C120 movement. The DD 016 really does push for a big change in this area and request developers to make some significant changes in what they do put forward and the design work that comes forward. And unfortunately, this is the first. Now, I actually take on what the speakers said, that we've gone from single dwelling to 4-story overnight, and it's horrible. It's a hard thing to take, but unfortunately, the state policy allows that. Now, we can councillors reject this tonight, but as I've said previously, I rather hold it in our hands, because I know that if we reject this, that the applicant can go to VCAT and can strip away a lot of council's requirements under the neighbourhood policy and can change it. So for that, I will support the recommendation that I've put forward. The big thing that I will take away from this, and I do hear the community, is that there is a traffic issue. One of the biggest things that was pushed by the 3081 policy was public transport. That the government, state, goes away and comes back with a better scenario, a better proposition on what needs to be done for public transport, considering that 3081 is inside the national employment cluster for Latrobe. So state is asking for higher development. We haven't even seen Belbardia complete yet. So there are other issues involved, and this is definitely the first, unfortunately, the first of one of those high rises in the DD 016 area. Now, the next item is Again, a Belfield redevelopment precinct. Unfortunately, that doesn't fall inside this area, but another one of council's push and states for the increased development in the area and increased community. Now, affordable housing is an issue. One thing I did take away is that this developer has developed before in the area, and I believe it was that 3-story one that you mentioned, Sebastian. And it's a nice, and it actually is a nice development. So we know that the developer does produce a good development. Now, unfortunately, he's got the ability to go to 14.5 metres. Council's managed to retain it to 12.7. And as I said, it is unfortunate, but for me, I rather hold it in our things and not let it go to VCAT without our requirements on it. So for that, councillors, I do support this.
Thank you. Would the second like to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Happy to second, noting that the ward councillor's done quite a bit of work on this with the officers and briefed the council certainly on his views and views of officers and what the residents have been telling him. It is a difficult one in the sense that, these planning overlays were approved, I believe, previous term of council, and responding to the state government framework. And I think what I've picked up tonight and at previous meetings is that some residents that are moving into that area on the expectation of single dwelling and larger premises, single block, are then finding that they're in that overlay. And I think it is a bit disappointing and it is challenging. Not an easy position as well for ward councillor and for the community. It's one of those things where it's not an easy thing to be seconding, to be honest, and to be supporting, but recognising, I suppose, what the ward councillor said in the sense that if it were to go to VCAT, the scope for development is higher than what's being considered tonight. And a range of the controls and other features that the officers have included in their recommendation could be lost through that process. I suppose for me as a broader observation, this highlights the point that Councillor McKern was making earlier in response to an item and the importance, I think, of planning matters being able to come back to council, because at least the community can eyeball the people making the decision, and we have to be accountable back to you as a community for what we do. We're not faceless bureaucrats sitting in a building somewhere in the CBD making these decisions. So we live it, we breathe it, and it isn't an easy decision for us to be making tonight as a council. But I will support the ward councillor on this. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other councillors wish to speak to the item? Councillor McKern.
89 objections. That's a lot of objections. I think the proponent will agree. In fact, it's probably been the largest number of objections that I've seen for a planning development in the time I've been a councillor. So whilst I understand that the application is highly compliant, doesn't necessarily mean the proponent has to meet the limits of that compliance. We hear that the developer's worked in the area a lot, knows the area, and people living in the future development will also need to live in the area. I'm just wondering whether there's a little bit of wriggle room there on the part of the developer. 3 stories would be acceptable according to one objector. Could that be considered? Increased setbacks and increased setback in basement setbacks. Could that be considered? Are they really big asks, given that this application represents an enormous change for the area? Yes, we appreciate it's a residential growth zone. Yes, we appreciate that there's a design development overlay, but does it necessarily mean that each of those controls has to be observed? I would ask the proponent to hear the voices of the 89 objectors. That's an incredible number of objectors. Personally, I don't think they're placing an enormous impost on this application. I'd like to think that the proponent is more considerate, and with all due respect to my colleague, because I know he's put a lot of effort into this, I won't be supporting this application this evening. And should it go to VCAT, perhaps third-party appeal rights will kick in for the objectors. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak to the item? Councillor Mark Di Pasquale.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm very concerned with regards to this one. This is not, you know, the short back and sides what we would expect. There's a lot of objectors on this one. It looks like the applicant has got their I's dotted and their T's crossed, and they know exactly what path they're going down. The state government are fully on board with regards to high developments in this area. They've sort of, you know, they're pushing for this. They're pushing for this. I think very, very difficult situation for Ward Councillor tonight. Very, very difficult situation. Ward Councillor could have just sat there and said, look, no, I'm listening to my community. It's not going to happen. And voted against it. If I was the Ward Council, I always put myself in that position, in those shoes. If I was the Ward Council, I would be very, very fearful of if it does go to VCAT, which it will if this is knocked back tonight. What will the outcome be? And I think it would be, I don't think the outcome will be quite good for the community, quite frankly. I think there's way too much room for them to, go against all conditions. A lot of the conversations that officers have had through this planning process, there's been a lot of things that have been negotiated, I suppose, between developer and planning department. I don't think I could sleep well at night if I was to push the community to a VCAT appeal, and then all those conditions are overturned, and it's even worse outcome because no one is going anywhere close to winning that way. I have to say this evening I'll be taking the lead of the Ward Councillor, making sure that he's put forward a very good case with regards to his position, with regards to how he's represented his community, with regards to how his back is up against the wall, with regards to the developer. I think I'll be voting in favour of this tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other councillors? No, all right. Well, I'll say something as well. And this is very challenging. Now, it's very easy to just say, I'm just going to reject it because a number of communities want it rejected. Last council meeting, we had 200 object to a planning meeting. Councillor McKern wasn't there. And that was difficult as well. Now, in this case, when we're, as a group of councillors, we look at the council officer report, and there were 8 different departments, professional departments within council that assessed it, and none of them rejected it on the planning rules to the area. It's also consistent with a 3081 urban design framework. And in that urban design framework, it says not to replicate existing built forms, but to provide a varied form and increase in certain locations around local parks and main roads. This site falls into those conditions, and not everyone wants a private garden or a large garden. This type of mid-rise is an important part to the mix that is needed to create a great variety throughout the area. And I know the community that are here tonight don't want to hear that, and they wanted to see us reject this. But without good grounds to refusal, I don't want to take this to VCAT and have you guys put your hopes in it and think you're going to win, because there are no planning grounds which I could identify that could enable us to win this one at VCAT. And on those grounds, that I feel it very difficult to reject this, and I'll be supporting the amendments that were put forward by the officers on this. Now, they don't speak to the things that you guys wanted, and especially Sebastian. This is a massive impact, and you're the one that's going to receive the greatest impact on your home, and I do really feel for that. That is dreadful for you, but we've got to work towards a strategic plan across Banyule, and in this case, there is a very important one to increase density in that area. So I will be supporting this one as well. And to the councillor right a reply.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just one last thing during everyone talking, and this seems to be the similar thing that keeps coming up. You know, the housing strategy's out. That's the place to be able to get your comments in that are going to affect future developments. Now, unfortunately, this one's gotten through, but the housing strategy's out. Get your comments in, because that's what reflects and makes a difference here. The Urban 301 policy was out for 6 weeks for community consultation. That means that that's when you had the chance to have the voice to make that effect. Now, I appreciate that some people weren't living there at the time, but this is the time. Housing strategy's out. Get your comments in, because that's going to make a difference to neighbourhood character.
We have a question from councillor. Microphone.
Could we get clarification through you, Mayor, what's meant by that? The housing strategy's out. My understanding is there's currently a survey on Shaping Banyule regarding the housing strategy. Is any housing strategy out?
I believe what councillor De Morales is referring to is the housing discussion paper that's currently subject to consultation.
Thank you, Director.
No, I'm sorry. This is not an opportunity to provide feedback. We've had the speaker speak, so I'm sorry for that. We now then put the motion. All those in favour? Against? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 6.2, Belfield redevelopment.
I would like to move
Precinct.
amendment for this one.
Yep, proposed amendment, development plan P1654, 2021 P22. There are 2 speakers to this item. I know you want to jump in quick. If members of the community would like to leave, if you've heard your item, I'll give you a moment to. We have 2 speakers to this item. Paul Morland will address council in person, speaking against the recommendation. Paul, please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Good evening, councillors. My name's Paul Morland. I've been involved with this piece of land for several years before it was sold. I was the booking officer at the community centre, the president of the Belfield Community Garden. I was involved in many meetings about the development of the site, right back to when the basketball courts were to be retained from the Banksia College. I quite often submit items on the Shaping Banyule. I realise that I'm one person and that the collective with other factors determines the outcome. What I don't understand is if the community gets involved and council decides on an outcome, in this case the selling off of the land with a development plan, that the council does not ensure that the developer follows the council's development plan, the heights being changed, the retention of trees, the linear park, which was thought was a really good positive. The Hague Street development has been jettisoned, as opposed to the mistakes of the old Belfield primary school development. Surely if the land was sold at a certain price, with council-endorsed development plan, the purchaser cannot then change some of the most important aspects of the plan. I'd also say that the lack of submissions to this particular item for what is a massive development has probably got something to do with the fact that most of the community have been involved with all the previous, like talks about the development plan, all those beautiful pictures of the high rises, the different plans and that are on Banyul's Shape and website. And they probably thought that Banyul's council's, statement was what the community was going to be getting. So that's probably why I think there's been 7 submissions to what is a massive development. And there's loads of other things I could go into about the park and that, but I mean, there's reams of paper. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have a question for the Speaker, so please wait a minute. Councillor McKern.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr Moreland. It sounds like you were instrumental. You were part of the initial consultation group towards the endorsement of the current development plan. Can you describe the process that council and community went through? How many members of the community were involved, and were they pretty much satisfied with the development plan that is the current endorsed plan?
I think Alison could talk about that in a previous role. There's quite a lot of community development, and as in all proposals, the outcome wasn't probably what everybody wanted, but there was extremely a lot of development. And I suppose the previous item and some of the council's decision was on, well, the guidelines are this and that, and this is why these decisions are made. And that's understandable to a point of view, but equally, if the guidelines are being put in place by council with a development plan and there's properties being sold at a certain price, then doesn't that go the other way as well? So there was a significant amount of community, workshops, meetings, strategies, lots and lots of pictures and that sort of thing over a number of years. And then, the outcome is the outcome, varying heights and all that. And then, extra story here, extra stories here. It seems quite significant, and particularly that linear park as well.
So are you suggesting that you'd like to see the development plan stay as it is? Is that what I'm hearing?
I believe so. Obviously there might be a change of a door colour or materials, and we understand that. And, we're after increased housing because of the issues in the area and that, then I'm not objecting to that. But council put a lot of effort with community for plans that the developers bought, and then it seems like there's quite significant changes, which doesn't, reflect probably what the, is being projected from council officers tonight, sort of thing.
Thank you, Mr Moreland. Through you, Mayor, could I ask the Director of City Development a question?
Yes.
Director, given the extent of community engagement that the Speaker has spoken to with regards to the preparation of the endorsed development plan, which we're being asked to change this evening or amend this evening, can you describe what level of community engagement was done with regards to these proposed amendments?
Through you, Mayor, the application for the amended development plan was given notice through direct letter to nearby residents. I believe there was also a sign erected on the site, which is part of that standard advertising process.
Next up, we have Alicia Curry, who will address council in person, speaking against the recommendation. Alicia, please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I agree with the previous speaker. I think that once council has a development plan, they should stick to it. And I'm just going to flag now, Mayor, I may need a little bit extra time to speak because there's a couple of topics.
There's only 2 minutes permitted.
I will do my best. So this is a strategic property sale site, and the sale was dependent on the planning permit, which put council in the light of wearing 2 hats. You're both the property owner plus the planning authority, which you've heard me speak against, I'm completely against. But the sale hasn't completed. The permit was issued last year. The sale hasn't completed. There must be a hole in the budget of up to $25 million, so why hasn't that come up to light in the previous item? The site is now asking for up to 7 stories, and I think that really this decision is based on Strategic Property saying, well, we've got a deal in the pipeline, we can't really back out on what the deal is because our budget is reliant on that income. So I think you should not be conflicted, and I think as the owner of the land, it isn't compatible with this decision. I think you should stick to what you had. I noticed that the planning application itself is not open to public consultation or notification, so I make request that please put out a notification to those people with interest, and please make sure it comes to a council meeting. Now, secondary to the site, I'd like to talk about climate change in the planning scheme. So, climate change on 13.01, objective to minimise the impacts of natural hazards. And, sorry, yes, I'm on notice. So to minimise the natural hazards and adapt to the impacts of climate change. And this includes site and design developments to minimise risk to life, health, property and the natural environment and the community infrastructure from natural hazards. Now, what I've got here in front of me, and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to give this to you, is from the Greening and Cooling Melbourne webpage, and it shows this site on an index of heat vulnerability from 0 to 5, shows this site and the previous site at a heat vulnerability index of 4. So I've got those if you would like to have a look at this. You'll also see that the tree coverage on these sites is less than 10%. And I suggest that council show us that you can act independently in those two hats, because otherwise I think you are just agreeing this plan because you have to complete this sale. And I'm very disappointed that this has come to council.
Could you please sum up?
It should not have been changed. That overlay that's on the site should stick. Why are we now prepared to start adding stories on top? Because the developer is driving the conversation.
You've had your time, thank you. Next up, we have Billy Rabakis from Urbis Planning Consultants, is speaking for the recommendation and has submitted a video submission, which has the same speaking time as the other 2 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Tonight we will be presenting the amendment application for the Belfield Precinct Development Plan, which has been prepared by our client Glenville in collaboration with Rothy Lohmann Architects. My name is Billy Rabakis from Urbis, planning consultants assisting Glenville with this project. I'd firstly like to thank council officers for their hard work on this amendment and their proactive approach to the project. As you are aware, this council approved the original development plan in March last year, which we are now seeking to amend. This is largely as a result of mix of dwelling types due to escalating costs in the construction sector and more broadly in the property market. Primary considerations for this amended development plan include an increase in the northern and southern buildings on stage 1 to 5 stories and an increase to the central building to 7 stories. Stage 2 and 3 to the east proposes a consistent built form of 3 to 4 story townhouses, replacing a mix of loft apartments and townhouses. The basement entry has also been relocated to Banksia Street and Perkins Avenue, while there has been large landscaping improvements across the site. Importantly, building heights remain generally in accordance with the DPO and have been adjusted slightly from the approved development plan. Heights of the apartment buildings are excessive in nature, stepping back at upper levels and ensuring no adverse amenity impacts like wind or overshadowing. 3-story townhouses are proposed on the periphery of stages 2 and 3 to ensure an adequate transition to adjoining properties, while 4 stories is only proposed central to the site. As noted, basement and townhouse vehicular access is now proposed from the north and south, in lieu of utilising Daphne Crescent to the east. The landscaping response is critical on a large site like this, and as such, the amended development plan seeks to retain the key landscaping response, including 25% deep soil planting for stage 1 and 25% permeability for stage 2 and 3. Our client did propose to remove tree 18, as this equates to their loss of 2 townhouses. We understand this is not supported by council officers. In summary, Glenville and Rothy Lohmann have proposed a considered amended development plan response, and we look forward to council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers. We now are moving, councillors, there's an officer report before you. Set out the agenda.
I have
packs.
amendment.
Oh, yep. Councillor De Morales has an amendment. Could we please see that?
So just the main one is changing building 1B reduced to 6 stories in height. The proposal was for 7.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Councillor De Pasquale. Would the mover like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It's actually, this is a big change for the area. As the speaker mentioned earlier, the land hasn't been sold. Right now we're talking about the proposed amended development plan. So it's around that side of things. My main concern with this one was the extra story that the developer was requesting. And I really didn't want that to happen. So hence keeping it to 6 stories in height. Speaking with officers, really noticing that the overall steps coming from Oriole Road back and around is still keeping to, in sense, the concept that was originally considered. And I'm happy to approve this with that 6 stories in height. Thanks.
Thank you. I just forgot, I should have asked the question earlier. Look, the Director for City Developments had some further information to share around the advertising of plans. Could you please speak to that?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. It was just in relation to a comment about the public notice for the planning permit application. Under the development plan overlay, planning permit applications don't form part of the public notice. There's this process that we're currently going through where consent is sought to amend the development plan. And if approval is obtained to change the development plan, then any planning permit issued must be consistent with that, but it isn't subject to public notification. So this process is the public process and not the second process. Thank you.
And I've got a further question around urban design advice on that interface between Ford Park and this development where what advice were we given and how does that, if we reflect on that, how does that reflect to this 6 and 5 story interface?
Yeah, so the urban design guidelines that set up the framework for this site spoke about a 5-story element presenting to Oriole Road. So the approval of a small section at 6 wouldn't be entirely inconsistent with that. The predominant built form would make that 5-story element.
Okay, thank you.
With all due respect, Mayor, should this motion not be carried, I'd like to foreshadow an alternative.
Okay.
To retain the existing development plan as it's currently endorsed.
Thank you, Councillor. We now move back to the seconder. Councillor De Pasquale, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this is part of a plan over many years with regards to delivering the community hub to the community. We knew there was going to be some form of development on this site. The question is what type of development, so heights, etc., which we're going through tonight. So I don't think it's a surprise that this is a site that is we are going forward with this. How this rolls out tonight is the question. There's a compromise there on the table there by Ward Council with regards to bringing down the height of one of the buildings by 1 story. So that's a compromise. I don't know. I'm unaware of whether the applicant is happy with that, or that's part of the thinking that they were going through, or the potential thinking that they were going through. So just willing to hear other comments from councillors. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Garotti?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I'll be happy to support the resolution with the amendment made by the ward councillor. Just looking, that seems reasonable and appropriate in the context. Obviously, we don't know as a council what the reaction to that might be of the applicant. As the council officers have said, they may walk away. Well, so be it, because we are wearing our second hat this evening in terms of weighing things up from a planning perspective. So I think, what the ward councillors look to put forward seeks to strike that balance, and will come what may. I think just to give reassurance back to the community, as of 30 June 2023, we have $89 million in cash reserves. So if there's any suggestion that we have to get these sale proceeds, no. It's factored into our long-term capital planning. The comments that I made earlier were in reference to the operating budget, not to our cash budget. And it's very important that this council closely monitors that operating budget every year to make sure that we're sustainable into the long term. But just for reference, I'll point out that there's $89 million in cash reserves. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Councillor McKern?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't understand why fellow councillors are talking about a compromise. We've just heard from speakers that there was a thorough community consultation process undergone to come up with the endorsed development plan we have. A endorsed development plan that respects the residential growth area that it is. 4 stories, 6 stories, 4 stories, townhouses proposed to stay at 3 to 4 stories. Well, there's something. I see absolutely no reason to change that just because a developer says so. We need to have a lot more confidence in this councillor group and the decisions that are made in conjunction with our community. It's our community that needs to live with these results. So I won't be supporting this change because I think we have a very good plan here, one that was actually developed under the urban design guidelines for the Belfield redevelopment precinct. A thorough process was engaged in. I see no reason to go back on that. I think it'll be a lot more successful the way it is rather than increasing the density to a density that is not complementary at all, even transition-wise, to the adjoining residential area. I think it's residential zone 1. So, Mayor, I won't be supporting it, and I would hope that fellow councillors rethink their decisions too.
Any other councillors? No, I have another question for the Director for City Development around the developer guidelines. Council officers have got a number of recommended alterations to what the developer put forward, and there's significant areas that it's being knocked back to align it with the developer guidelines. Could you please address some of those areas that the recommendation speaks to?
Thank you. In response to your question, Mayor, we've made requirements for additional tree retention, which we understand would have the effect of effectively reducing part of the development in order to enable that to happen. I believe their consultant tonight suggested that would be the removal of 2 of the townhouse apartments. We've also looking into some of the improvements around movements and space around the development. An earlier version of this development plan anticipated a section of what would be publicly available open space through the middle of the development. But what's proposed here wouldn't be something that we would consider public open space. That's more of a pedestrian walkway. So there are still elements through the next stage, which would be the assessment of any planning application, where we'd be looking to make changes and requirements through that fine-grained detailed design to make sure that we achieve all of those design outcomes for the site.
Okay, thank you. That said, look, I'd like to just note that this is a very big, important strategic site, and we have to take the guidance of strategic planners, urban design guidelines, and what our community says. And when it comes to height controls, there's a complex set of circumstances we need to consider of 5 and 6 stories at the interface to Ford Park. And I believe that the amendment does bring that building height down to sit within it and consider those guidelines. At the rear, there's the potential for the developer to have gone 4-storey over the whole of the apartments, is I believe that's the case. They're not, they're going 3 and 4 stories, a mixture of those. And so there are areas in which the developer could have gone bigger at the first stage. They didn't. They are now a little bit in some areas and others not. So it's complicated to say if this is a significant deviation. The other area that officers spoke to was the importance of that clear passageway through the development site and an important tree to be retained. We're doing both of those, and on those grounds I'm also supportive of this amendment, which knocks off a number of apartments and townhouses. So I too will be supportive of this officer amended recommendation that is before us this evening. That being said, I will now be putting the motion forward. All those in favour? Against? I declare the motion carried. I'm sorry, community participation was through the question time. I'm sorry, this is not an opportunity. Could you please sit down? Could you please sit down? Could you please take a seat? You had an opportunity to speak. We're now moving on to item 6.3, planning and building activities, January to June 2023. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors, there's an officer report before you set out on the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Councillor McKern, seconded by Councillor Garotti. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to congratulate the development planning team for some strong planning outcomes in the first half of this year. The report names a number of highlights, but I thought I'd mention them. 82% of planning applications were determined within the 60 statutory days, and 90% of VicSmart determined within the 10 business day statutory time frame. This is an improvement on the previous review period. Well done. What's also particularly interesting is the decrease in the number of decisions which have been overturned by VCAT throughout the review period, with 27% of applications for review set aside by the tribunal. This is compared to 40% in the previous 6 months and has resulted in an increase in decisions upheld, with 37% of decisions upheld. So that's actually quite encouraging, particularly for those who would seek third-party appeal rights. And the last highlight that I'd like to point out, Mayor, is the percentage of all electric developments increasing by 16% in the 22-23 financial year, from 10 to 26%. That's quite heartening. The low light is building services and Banyule BPI. And I'd like my concerns noted regarding the 22% decrease in building permits issued compared to the same period last year, and also the declining BPI financial position over the past 3 years, which leaves BPI and Council in a $181,000 deficit for this 22-23 financial year. This is quite concerning, Mayor, and through you, I would like to ask the Director of City Development to comment on BPI's declining permits and financial position. What reasons might be applied, Director, and how is Council addressing these matters?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mayor. We have seen that 20-odd% drop off in the BPI income and the number of applications coming in for that period. That's fairly consistent with the state figures for the downturn, which actually sits at around that 30% mark. So in some respects, not perhaps as bad as it could have been. In response to that reduction in the number of new permit application work, which we're seeing across the state, that team has been working much more in that statutory building space. We've been doing a lot of excellent work with the swimming pool compliance matters and working on jobs that have the remnant flammable cladding that we're seeing across the sector. And I note that Banyule is certainly one of the leaders in the sector in relation to pool compliance and other matters, which is something that we can be very proud of and is achieved because in some respects we've had that quiet period with the work reduction in construction activity across the municipality.
Through you, Mayor, I might just ask the Director another question. You mentioned that the decrease in building permits being issued is fairly consistent across the sector. Is that reflected both in the private and government sectors issuing building permits, or is that more consistent in government?
Through you, Mayor, there are very few councils that issue building permits. It's predominantly work that's done within the private sector. So Banyule is notable in that we do issue private building permits as well as the sort of council work that we do. That's consistent across all building permits. So the 30% decline is in all building activity across the state, regardless of who is issuing that building permit.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
Good summary by Councillor McKern. Thank you.
Any other councillors? I also agree. Good summary. Thank you, Councillor McKern. Some good information there, and thank you for summing that up for everyone in the audience. I now then will put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 8.2, access improvements to the Inclusive Employment Program. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors. Oh, yes. Item 8.1, Inclusive Employment Program, 2022-23 financial program update. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors, there is an officer report before you as set out on the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Councillor Garotti, and seconded Councillor Neely. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I believe we have two officers in the gallery from the program area that have soldiered on until 9:30 p.m. So thank you. And not just a thank you for being here to hear us discuss the item, but just thank you for the great work that is done by the department. Because I think we had 14 participants go through the last program, and of that, 12 have effectively moved on to full-time employment or pathway to employment in terms of training and development. And that is a terrific result when you consider that we're offering this program to people who were struggling to break into the workforce and whose chance before program may have been substantially less. So to have, an 80% success rate is phenomenal. And I think it's just testament to the work of the officers involved and the way that the whole program now has been embraced and embedded within Banyule, within the whole culture of the organisation. And I know that we talk on those figures, participants and success rates. It's often the real life case studies and the transformational impacts it has that I suppose makes the biggest difference. And to hear stories of participants who have applied for jobs, who have applied for interviews, to hear stories of participants whose parents have gone on that journey with them, and then to go through the program at Banyule and to be a success at Banyule and then to move on beyond that. So it is good that we bring this forward every year. I think just to keep in the back of our minds the good work that we're all doing together, because this, we have so many challenges that we deal with as a council, and we've touched on a number of them tonight, but to be able to sit back and celebrate something really good and positive that we're doing with our community, I know it invigorates me, and I know that I hope it invigorates the officers involved. And I think looking at our CEO, it invigorates the whole organisation to know that we're part of this and transforming people's lives. So thank you again, and really excited to be able to note this report and recommend it to the council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Would the second like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Garotti said a lot of what I wanted to say. I think it's lovely to follow the pathways of the participants, as he mentioned. It has a high success rate and lift in opportunities, and opportunities that they may never have come across, in their life, because this is tailored to their interests. There are improvements as well, opportunities in this report to strengthen the connections with agencies and accessibility, the application process and workshops. But however, these programs may broaden the reach of the program even further, and I look forward to seeing those things happen, particularly for the people that are falling under that intersectionality umbrella. We want to really reduce those gaps. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Councillor De Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just to mention, look, this is, I think the organisation of council should be proud of this achievement, this program. I mean, as a council law and as a body of council laws, I mean, we haven't made a decision to actually do this or not do this. We do assign the budget and we do assign the program itself, but we don't, this is not something that we have, individually signed off or anything like that. This has come from the organisation itself. And I think the success I would like to see, and we should have maybe, sometimes council will put a presentation on at the start of our meetings when, there's an acknowledgement of some award that has been won. I think this would have been a good one. I would have loved to have seen a couple of case studies, bit of a presentation before the meeting started tonight. This is a bit of an acknowledgement for those part of the program. So yeah, congratulations to those in the community wellbeing part of council, everyone who's been associated with this program. Keep it up, really impressed by it.
Councillor Champion.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a question for everyone in the chamber and a question for everyone in live stream land. How did you feel when you got the phone call or you got the letter or the email that said, congratulations, we are giving you a position in our company. Congratulations, we are giving you a full-time role. Congratulations and welcome aboard. You start next Monday. Now, each one of us at some point received that message. And how excited were you to get that message? And how valuable did you believe you were to other people when you got that message? This report states a lot of information and a lot of fact. What you can't get from this report is that human sense of excitement and sense of personal value because you got a job. The way you get that is that you come and you meet these applicants and you come and attend the last evening when they're presented with their certificates. And you get that sense of joy from them. That is what comes out of this inclusive employment program for our residents. And that cannot be achieved in so many other ways. And some of these residents do go on to other work, either within council or outside council. It's in some capacity. And that's exciting for them. And it's exciting for us. So I know the first
Can I ask you to sum up, please?
Yep, for the first of this programs was rolled out in 2020. It will just be continued to roll out every single year because it is so successful. So thank you to everybody involved. This is just gold. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? I'll just say quickly, I don't want to cut myself off, but I need to if I get that. Look, there's a lot of inspired people around this program. We've got 2 staff members out there tonight, Georgie and Emma. Thank you for coming in. And I'd just like to acknowledge that you guys, when I see excitement about programs, it's lovely to see you guys when you're out there doing that. The end of year program end to celebrate the jobs, the people that made it through the program was a beautiful event. They were very excited. They had that excitement at the end as they did the start. And so thank you, Councillor Champion. That is, when those people would have received their congratulations, they would have been jumping for joy because they have it a little bit harder than all of us probably, or a lot of people in our community getting that first job. So it is a program that many people get excited about, and I think it's an important one we do at Council. With that said, I will now then put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 8.2, access improvements to the Inclusive Employment Program. There are no speakers on this item. Councillors, there is an officer report before you as set out on the agenda papers. I'm calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor Garotti, seconded by Councillor Champion. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I think, these opportunities have arisen from the work of our advisory committees, and in particular, our RAP committee, chaired by co-chaired by Councillor De Morales. And I think it's just an opportunity just to rebalance the program a little bit and have a little bit more of a weighting now for our First Nations people looking for opportunities, as well as a bit more of a rebalancing toward those with disabilities. So, very happy to be supporting this recommendation and to see what comes through. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And the seconder?
Just really briefly, Mayor, it's a perfect example of continuous improvement, thinking, how do we make this better? Perfect example. Of course, I'm going to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Neely.
Thank you, Mayor. This is about improving accessibility to this program for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and people living with a disability. And as I mentioned before, this will broaden the reach of the program even further. So as mentioned, Councillor Morales and I are on the RAP committee, and we listened to our First Nations members add valuable insight as to how to engage Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people by working with other Aboriginal organisations to engage residents, like I hope I pronounced this correctly, Warrumalang, which is the AFL Sport Ready Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander employment arm. So the reality is there are barriers to employment for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and this improvement will hopefully address this and engage more into the program. Thank you, Mayor.
You, Councillor. Any other councillors? No, I'd just also like to note the work that Councillor Neely does on our Reconciliation Action Plan. This has been on discussion for quite some time, multiple times in that committee, and it's important that we continue to refine the program. Every inclusivity group that we have in Banyule need customised, tailored programs to make sure we succeed across all those areas. And this is one of those groups we got that advice. So I'm fully supportive of this approach and the continued work we do in this area. With that said, I will now put the motion. All those in favour? Against? I declare the motion carried. We're now moving on to item 9.1, notices of motion. I note that there are no notices of motion this evening. We then move on to item number 10, general business. We have a number of general businesses, first starting with the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Alita McKern.
Thank you, Mayor. I was absolutely delighted to meet with Ivanhoe Grammar Year 3 students last week. And we might put a few images up on the screen. These 8 and 9-year-olds are studying community connectedness and healthy eating and asked me to have a chat to them about our urban food strategy. We had robust conversations about what makes a community healthy. And one student suggested we should have a farm in Chelsworth Park to grow healthy food. I asked where in Chelsworth Park. The reply was the soccer ground. At which point, rebuttal from all the soccer students occurred, which led to a discussion on how we planned land use and often have to resolve conflicting community needs and interests, which is the lot of planning professionals and community decision makers like councillors. Teacher then asked the students to draw Councillor McKern. Not sure about that as an exercise, but they were particularly enamoured with the basket of mandarins I brought from the market. And I'm happy to say that they were all very keen on eating the mandarins. So the 60 or so mandarins were very quickly quaffed. So a bit of fun with the Year 3s from Ivanhoe Grammar. And the other item I really would like to talk to are the 2 great art exhibitions on at Ivanhoe Library at the moment in their 2 gallery spaces. Works by the famous Murray Griffin and Julia Greenham. The Mayor and I were delighted to attend the opening last Friday, which hosted an absolute full house of attendees. They're very popular exhibitions. And I must say, I was really taken with Murray Griffin, renowned printmaker, painter and war artist, his works. This is an absolutely unique exhibition with many pieces being on loan by members of the Griffin family who were there on the evening and from the Shire of Remembrance, the Shrine of Remembrance, I should say. We don't have a Shire of Remembrance. And La Trobe University's art collection, as well as our own. So thank you to our arts officers, 3 of whom are here tonight, and to Steph Neo for curating these exhibitions, only on till I believe the 31st of August. So really worth it. If you're not going to see any other art exhibition this year, I recommend that everyone get in to see, particularly Murray Griffin. It is absolutely exceptional. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have Councillor Mark De Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a notification to Bakewell Ward residents and visitors as well. The next Bakewell Ward meeting will be held on Wednesday, the 16th of September in Level 4, 1 Flintoff Street. It's held at 1 p.m, so 1 to 2 p.m. During the day this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have Councillor Champion.
Thanks, Mayor. I attended 2 Sherborne Ward Scout Group annual reporting and presentations last week, both at Montmorency and Lower Plenty. So the ARIPS are the scouting equivalent of an organisation's AGM, annual general meeting, recognising achievements by its members as well as its financial status for the previous 12 months. So both Montmorency and Lower Plenty Scout groups, while they differ in sizes, but they demonstrate sound membership and growth over the last 12 months. So both groups are made up of enthusiastic participants of various ages, volunteers, scouting leaders and parents. Both groups connect positively with council through grant applications, which in many cases are successful, as well as events, and connect with the community through many fundraising activities. World Scout Day is celebrated and acknowledged around the world on the 1st of August every year. So the Scout movement has members ranging in age from 5 years old to 25 years old. It's universally essentially known for weekly meetings, activities, and very often weekend camps during the school terms. It is supported by many volunteers, either as leaders or parents and other family members. This year, several achievement awards were presented to Joeys, Scouts, Venturers and Rovers Rovers across both groups. The highest award being the Queen Scout Award, likely transitioning into the King Scout Award. And it was presented to one of the Montmorency Scout Group venturers this year. Now, this is the most prestigious award a Scout can achieve. One of the Montmorency venturers also had the opportunity to put her Scouting achievements towards her university degree. Hold that thought. Worth joining the Scouts for. Always a pleasure to be invited to the Arups every year, as all Scout groups are warm and welcoming here in Banyule. And it is also a privilege to hear humanity in action. There's education to improve skills and expand knowledge. There's encouragement and support to persevere. There's inspiration to think, create and solve problems. There is sharing for a sense of community. And above all, the Scout movement continues to create leaders of our children and youth for our future. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
We've got one fan of the Scouts out there, at least. Any other councillors? No, I've got 3 items since the last council meeting and I've restrained myself. First up is Vietnam Veterans Day on the 18th of August. On the 12th of August, Memorial Park, Greensboro, RSL, in which I attended with the Mayor of Nillumbik, Ben Ramachan, and MPs Colin Brooks, Vicky Ward, Anthony Carbines, Lauren Carthage, and Kate Thwaites. It was a very well-attended event. On the 19th of August, Lower Plenty Football Club, Councillor Liz Neely and myself, Vicky Ward and Sonia Terpster also attended. Both events were very well attended and a very important opportunity to acknowledge all that was put in by many in our community in the Vietnam War. A very challenging subject matter when they came back from the war, and hearing some of the stories and experiences, it really is important that we do acknowledge all those that went to war. Second up is Access Wayo for their planting along Darebin Creek. On the 20th of August, I attended a church organisation's outreach program that reached out to Banyule City Council. Their mission is to do good, and ASOS stands for A to Z Save the Earth, with more than over 20 volunteers from down southeast of Melbourne. They all came across, thanks to all that attended and to the council officers that supported them in that program. And finally, the Heidelberg District Bendigo Bank acquired their social enterprise status. Congratulations. They had their event on the 23rd of August to celebrate the achievement, attended by the Deputy Mayor, Leda McKern, and myself, and represented by our social enterprise team as well. That was a wonderful event. They've worked hard to achieve that, and they do a lot of work in the community. So I'm very keen to acknowledge that. And that concludes that section of the meeting. We now move on to public questions. We have received 8 public questions this evening, and I now request Council Managers of Governance and Integrity, Kristen Fort, to read out the questions, and Directors to read out Council's responses. The public questions will be included in the minutes of the meeting. The minutes will be available on the website later this week.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. The first question that Council received is from a resident in Rosanna, and it relates to resource allocation associated with the federal referendum on the Indigenous voice to Parliament. The question was allowed in accordance with the governance rules, and the question reads, what funds and or staff time has Council expended in the last 12 months on events, activities or promotions associated with the Yes case for the upcoming federal referendum on the Indigenous voice to Parliament? And we'll hand over to Kath Brackett, Director of Community Wellbeing, to respond to that one.
The response. At the 5th of December 2022 Council meeting, Council endorsed the Uluru Statement from Heart in full and agreed to take practical action for a better future and a reconciled Australia. At this time, Council also endorsed working in partnership with the Banyule Reconciliation Action Plan Advisory Committee, RAP, and Banyule First Nations community to develop and deliver a community engagement and communication plan on the various components of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. The statement is comprised of 3 reforms: voice, treaty and truth. Banyule City Council is committed to providing information about all 3 sections, as well as information about the upcoming referendum, and has made a budget allocation of approximately $25,000 to support these initiatives. Council is not suggesting how to vote, instead circulating information in different formats, for example, via the website, in the Banyule Banner publication and in-person community information sessions. Banyule City Council has therefore not spent any funds or staff time on events, activities or promotions associated with the Yes case.
Through you, Mayor. The second question was submitted by Pippa Griffiths from Ivanhoe East, and this related to the Belfield Community Hub. The question was allowed in accordance with the governance rules, and the question reads, with the Belfield Community Hub under high demand from its own community, plus those redirected from locations such as Ivanhoe East Preschool, a 4-kilometre drive away, and the Horden Street Community Hall in Heidelberg, which is 2.5 kilometres, Ringle Orchard Society, etc. What population area and number was the Belfield Community Hub built to service? And hand over to Kath Brackett again to respond to that question.
Thank you. The Belfield Community Hub services both the local population and broader municipal population and is inclusive and welcoming to all. Spaces within the hub are used for a number of services and programs. These include social support catering for the needs of older adults over 3 rooms, program space for children and families, including maternal and child health service and kindergarten program spaces for 66 licensed places, a community garden, a social enterprise cafe that supports employment pathways for youth and unemployed job seekers, and spaces available for community and organisational hire, including 3 community meeting rooms, a 30-person program room and 2 consulting suites. Rooms for hire are available for many community groups right across Banyule.
Through you, Mayor, the third question has been submitted by Michelle Jovis from Heidelberg, and this question relates to council protocols in dealing with developers. The question has been allowed in accordance with council's governance rules, and the question reads, what is council's protocol for developers contacting councillors directly, and does council governance maintain a register of these communications? And I'll hand this one over to Natasha Swan, Director of City Development, to respond to this question.
Thank you. There are no protocols in place in relation to how a developer may contact a councillor. If a councillor wishes to respond to a query by a person associated with a planning application, including a developer, the permit applicant or an objector, the request should be referred to the relevant manager and or director, or through our governance team's councillor request process. In accordance with the Code of Conduct, councillors are required to attend any meetings with planning permit applicants with a staff member present. In practice, it is preferred that requests for meetings are formalised and open to all parties associated with the application, including objectors, as is the case with council-held consultation meetings. Councillor attendance at meetings is noted on the relevant planning file. An interim review of protocols will be undertaken with the release of the IBAC recommendations as set out in item 3.4 on tonight's agenda.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, the fourth question is from Jane Crone from Eaglemont, and this question relates to Horden Street Community Hall and community groups. The question was allowed in accordance with Council's governance rules, and the question reads, including Ringle Orchard Society, senior citizens, various dance groups, etc., could Council provide the list of community groups and the number of people within those groups that are currently being dislodged 2.5 kilometres out of a major activity centre from 70 to 80 Horden Street, Heidelberg to the Belfield Community Hub, prior to Council's consideration of selling the Horden Street Community Hall? And I'm handing this one over to Kath Brackett again, from Director of Community Wellbeing, to respond.
Thank you. As per Council's resolution on the 29th of May 2023 relating to the proposed sale of 78 to 80 Horden Street, Heidelberg, known as Horden Street Hall, officers have been working productively with all current users groups to identify suitable alternative locations that meet their needs should the sale proceed. Council has a range of community halls across the Banyule community, including the Belfield Community Hub, that could potentially service existing groups' needs. For most groups, a similar geographical location is not the most critical factor, as members come from other suburbs as well as outside of Banyule. Key considerations include parking, storage capabilities, access, amenity and facility, available living auxiliary services, and the functionality of space available to accommodate groups' activities. Our focus is working with groups individually to understand and facilitate their specific needs, and fortunately, we're able to offer most groups more than one alternative option to consider. These negotiations are currently in progress, with one group confirmed to relocate to Belfield. We will continue to work in partnership with the groups and are confident that alternative suitable options can be provided for all groups should the sale proceed. The community groups we are currently liaising with and their associated membership numbers are as follows. Ivanhoe Photographic Group, 30 members. Warringal Orchard Society, 40 members. Warringal Senior Citizens, 15 members. Marinda's Ballroom, 15 to 30 members. Heidelberg Over 50s Dance Group, 15 to 25 members. Elsner Day Ministry, 20 to 40 members. Life Activity Group, 20 members. And Studio V of Dance, 170 students per week across 35 classes approximately. Council will receive a further report to consider the commencement of the statutory process for the sale of land at 78 to 80 Horden Street, Heidelberg, in accordance with Section 114 of the Local Government Act 2020. This process will entail giving public notice of its intention to sell and undertaking a community engagement process in accordance with Council's community engagement policy.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, the fifth question that we received was from Eaglemont Village Trader Association. There was some background information that was provided, and in summary, it related to the Eaglemont Village Traders Association and impacts of film shots. The question was approved in accordance with Council's governance rules, and the question reads, when production companies express an interest in using Eaglemont Village for future use, will Banyule City Council negotiate a fair market price to be paid to Eaglemont Village Traders Association and request the land location is listed in the credits? The much needed funds will be well utilised for the ongoing and upkeep and restoration of the historical village. And I'll hand over to Natasha Swan, Director of City Development, to respond to that question.
Thank you. Council's General Local Law Number 1, 2015, and filming guidelines outline the process and requirements for filming within Banyule. In all cases where filming occurs on council land, a filming permit is required to be approved by Council's Municipal Laws and Public Assets team. Council's filming guidelines state that where possible, council assistance in the production should be acknowledged in the end credits or as mutually agreed. The acknowledgement will generally read, filmed in Banyule, Victoria, or thanks to Banyule City Council. Regarding fees charged for filming permits, Council's practices align with the Filming Approval Act 2014 and their guidelines, the Victorian Film Friendly Guidelines. These specify that unless specifically authorised by another act, fees charged by a public agency for applications for film permits and issuing film permits must not exceed cost recovery. There is no provision for Council to compensate traders through that process.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, the sixth question was received from Alicia Curry from Rosanna, and it related to recent confidential decision of Council, Strategic Sites Homes Victoria business case. The question was allowed in accordance with Council's governance rules. The question reads, in Council meeting Monday the 27th February 2023, item 11.2, referred to as Strategic Sites Home Victoria business case. So would Council advise whether discussions include the sale or transaction of Council-owned land and in which suburb? And I'll hand over to Natasha Swan, Director of City Development, to respond to that question.
Thank you. The matters contained in the report Strategic Sites Homes Victoria business case, contained in the Council meeting 27th of February 2023, remain confidential at this time and no further details can be publicly disclosed.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. The seventh question was received from John Walkley from Ivanhoe. A host of background information was provided. In summary, it related to 3081 framework, Heidelberg West and affordable housing. The question was approved in accordance with Council's governance rules, and the question reads, the 3081 framework, Heidelberg West, identified a number of sites to provide substantial social housing, including Balbarita, up to 460 dwellings, Hurricane, up to 130 dwellings, and Boona, up to 481 dwellings. And as the sites had existing social housing demolished, Balbarita, 94, Tarracan 60, and Boona, ? How do these sites factor into the overall requirement for affordable housing that is in discussion with Pillar 1 Housing for All housing strategy and the estimated demand within Banyule? And I'll hand this one again back to Natasha Swan, Director of City Development.
Thank you. The sites identified in the submitter's question all provide for social housing constructed by the state government. We're aware of the planned development and construction underway on some of these sites. As the dwellings are completed, they will appear in the housing data we have, and we will show an increase in the number of social housing units. Affordable housing is more than just social housing, and our interim policy seeks to increase the numbers of both social and affordable housing provided across the municipality.
Thank you. And the last question through you, Mayor, was submitted by Roger Fife from Ivanhoe. The question was approved in accordance with Council's governance rules. And the question reads, how many residential parking permit applications from Precinct 61 residents have been received for parking permits in Precinct 59 and 60 since 2023? PPP came into effect on the 1st of the 7th, 2023, broken down by issued / pending and under appeal for refusal. And I'll hand it over to Natasha Swan, Director of City Development, to respond to the question.
Thank you. Residents can only directly apply for permits in the zone they reside in. They can apply for a parking permit eligibility review if they are unsatisfied with their entitlements. There have been no requests for a review from a resident in Area 61 under any of the 4 policy grounds, including to park in either Area 59 or Area 60.
Thank you. That's the end of public questions. Now we're moving on to closure of the meeting. There is no confidential meeting tonight, and I now close the meeting at 10:09 p.m. Thank you all in the audience this evening and online. The next council meeting, ordinary council meeting, will be held on Monday the 25th of September 2023. Thank you.